When introducing magic items that have charges, limited uses, or that adapt to as the character grows, how do you handle players who find these evolving mechanics exciting, those who feel frustrated by the uncertainty, and those who view them as balanced compromised?
They can bite me if they don't. I'm very much well, as far as people feel frustrated by magic items I give out, that's probably because I hardly ever do it. As to the nature of them, they can bite me if they don't like it. I'm very much of the school that too much magic takes the magic out of magic. I think magic items should be rare. I think it's better to give useful than powerful items most of the time. Yeah. Utility things are very useful, especially if, like with me, I'm very strict about things like, encumbrance and the food you have and the water you drink. So
as far as where were you last week?
Yeah. So stuff like that makes a big difference in the game when they all of a sudden don't have to worry about running out of water, especially after I've killed one or two of them that way. As far as I really like the idea of items that grow with the character. I think that's a very good idea, especially in a level game. So it's not just like, okay, throw this on the pile now. Because that kind of takes it all out of them. And I'm a big fan also of with cursed items. Although I think items should be just strictly cursed for the most part. Because I mean, how much of a dick do you have to be to invest the time and effort into making a -3 sword?
Well, as a little spoiler here, we're going to talk about cursed items definitely in segment 2.
Okay, well I'll leave that for there then. But I definitely think items that grow with the characters are excellent, especially since in a lot of the literature, like Tolkien in particular, the ring was only really so powerful depending on who was wielding it. In lesser hands, it was a lesser item. And as the character becomes more powerful, they're able to draw more from an important item. So I think and that's an excellent way to avoid, the creep of just throwing things out there and they become demystified and don't really matter anymore. I mean, these things aren't mass produced in a factory somewhere.
I could not agree with what you said more. Pretty much that entire dissertation there. I'm with you 100%. Can you recall a situation where a player disliked the limits you imposed, whether it was the amount you gave out or more specifically to the topic that the weapon itself had some sort of either environmental limit, a charge limit, your level is too low, you can't quite control it the way you want to yet limit, whatever it happens to be. Have you run into that kind of situation? If so, how'd you handle it?
I have thrown some nasty items at people, in particular if I think a player is particularly prone to greed. I will give them items that are going to harm them if they do certain things. Or, for instance,
can you give an example? Yeah, please.
A particular example, and the guy left the campaign over because he was so pissed off. But basically, a powerful NPC that they really shouldn't have trusted basically gave him this very powerful magic cloak. It's like, I don't want you to tell the others though, they'll be jealous. I've been watching them, you're special. And of course it wound up doing horrible things to him and taking him over in the end, and he got really mad. It was like, how long have you been playing with me, dude? You should have been suspicious from the word go.
Now would you add something in there to where they could discover that it actually had that negative side effect to it?
If he had bothered to look into it, yes. But he thought, oh, I got this amazingly cool thing that's grossly OP'd me. And I picked him out because I knew he'd be like that.
Target the one that's going to rage the most. I love it. And I mean that, folks. I do. I think I'm not saying that you should go after your players. He might be saying, I'm not saying. But at the same time, if you know somebody's going to have the visceral response, that's the one you kind of want to do it to, right? Do you guys have any questions or comments about what Doc Flamingo said?
Well, my thought here, though, is that temptation to corrupt the heroes is actually a classic heroic fiction trope. and a lot of like tragedies in stories are because the hero became corrupted and failed to resist the temptation. So working that into a TTRPG absolutely works.
Before I'll do anything,
It's just one of those things you have to don't just be like, haha, gotcha. No. That's a boring story. You have to make the story interesting.
Yeah, they have to have made a mistake to before I'll do anything really nasty on them. They have to have shown like some character flaw or just been reckless and stupid and not thought. I won't just arbitrarily screw them over, but I will give them all the rope they need to hang themselves.
Weapons that grow with you. I know that what he said kind of. Mark Hockman, can you give an example of what you're thinking of when you asked that? Necessarily make it cursed.
You mean for the cursed items one?
Well, cursed is going to be segment 2. Right now, we're focused on weapons that grow with you. I know that what he said kind of moved into the cursed category, but I mean, just because something has a side effect does not necessarily make it cursed. Rune weapons from Palladium, I wouldn't necessarily consider them cursed, but they're going to take you over. Ask me how I know.
Well, I mean, I'll get to that. Okay, that's items with limits. I forget where I saw it, but some game I saw years ago, and I don't remember which it was. One of the items that they just gave you at the start was a magic rock. This game used an MP-based magic system, and you could use the magic rock to partially refill your mana pool every now and then. Not all that often, actually. But it's just one of those things where it's like it's a basic, boring thing, but it's something that never stops being useful.
All right. How is it useful, though?
Well, that was a game where you actually needed to do things to refill your mana pool. It didn't just automatically refill on its own.
Gamer. We'll go back to the question and ask him.
Something like that is huge in a situation like that. That can save your ass.
Yeah, exactly.
Exciting. Those who feel frustrated by the uncertainty. Okay, well, let's slide on over to the crafting gamer. We'll go back to the question and ask him. When introducing magic items that have charges, limited uses, or that adapt as the character grows, how do you handle players who find these evolving mechanics exciting? Those who feel frustrated by the uncertainty, and those who view them as a balanced compromise.
Well, the balanced compromise and the excited are pretty easy. It's like, don't overdo it, but don't underdo it. And you usually keep both of them happy. Those that don't like it, I usually cut them off at the pass by doing.
We'll give him a moment to try to come back here. And he cut himself off at the pass.
That's like the third or fourth time I've seen his screen freeze.
Getting cut off at the pass and then you froze.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
cut the people who wouldn't like it.
We'll give him a moment to try to come back here. There we go.
You're going to get more of a view of me than we're going to, but.
All right. So you said something about getting cut off at the pass and then you froze.
Yeah, I like to cut the people who wouldn't like it off at the pass by flooding them at level 1 with a crap ton of, well, the equivalent of +1 weapons and items. But as you reach level 5, 6, you're still getting nothing but +1s. I actually don't. It's like, oh, when are we going to get a +2? Oh, well, here's a plus. Well, let's say the introducing of the expanding weapons. Here's like, because I will get into what I do with rune weapons right now. I actually don't give you what immediately. Oh, you have 6 weeks before the weapon's bonded to you. You get all of its abilities. No.
Okay.
Every 6 weeks you unlock an ability. And then another. So the rune weapon grows with you. When
Is there a reason why you determine 6 weeks?
For each ability and spell. 6 weeks was just a random number. But this is partially to allow me to.
Got it.
But like then basically whatever number it takes to bond to you to like its full power, you actually have to go through that for each ability and spell. So it's not just instant. It's not just going to be a +1. But this is partially to allow me to introduce rune weapons at a low level. But it also means that you can. Introduce them, like I said, after you flooded the characters with a bunch of 1/1s. They're going to be like, oh my God, this thing is going to grow with me. It's not just going to be a +1. I can actually do other things with it. They're too excited to be angry about it.
Training or just doing a lot of downtime. So if for whatever reason, so you said 6 weeks, and I'm gonna hang on that for just a little bit because I kind of want to just see the mentality behind this. if they're spending time training or just doing a lot of downtime, could they gain 2 or 3 abilities if they basically spend 3 months spending their plunder?
Only if they're doing it strategically. If they're not spending time with the weapon, if they're I'm going to spend my entire time drinking, whoring, and stuff like that, okay, that don't count. So it also rewards. But if you're going to go ahead and spend the money or the time to actually practice, yeah, I'll go ahead and let you activate ability or 2.
Have you
I mean, that's kind of what training is for anyway, is to familiarize yourself with your weapons and your equipment.
To evolve?
So it also rewards the role play of actually training your character. I can't remember it right off the top of my head. There's a very powerful rune weapon.
Have you ever encouraged player collaboration in uncovering conditions needed for an item to evolve?
Yes. There is the average rune weapon is anywhere from can't remember it right off the top of my head. There's a very powerful rune weapon. This is the only rune weapon that really only one person can wield, but it is so powerful. It's like, yeah, the party should be in charge of this thing because the average rune weapon is anywhere from 3rd level to 6th level spells. This is the only rune weapon I personally am aware of that has 10th level spells. And then finally, whoever very, very powerful is the one who'll get it long term. And if I were to introduce that, I never got a chance to. I wanted to, but I would introduce it. Well, this character has to use it for X amount of time, and this character has to use it for an X amount of time. And then finally, whoever is the most befitting is the one who'll get it long term. It was a whole campaign actually to get this one rune weapon. I had a really good plan. Problem is I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like you had to do certain things to make the blade trust you, and then you had to go like.
That's fine. Hawkman, Doc, do you have any?
It was a whole campaign actually to get this one rune weapon to make it so one person in the party had to be able to use it, but it was meant to involve the whole party.
Muted, Doc.
I think I might have it written down, but I don't know where it is.
I think a lot
that's
of
fine.
times it's best to give
Hawkman, Doc, do you have any questions or
I don't like to give it like individual
follow-ups for Crafting Gamer?
Specialized for them, but for the most part, I like giving out party.
You're muted, Doc.
It's the whole group. No, not really. I think a lot of times it's best to give party items. I don't like to give it like individual characters. I might throw 1 or 2 specialized for them, but for the most part, I like giving out party items, stuff that benefits the whole group.
Well,
the basic idea of having an item about how it's a super powerful weapon. The basic idea of having an item that the party kind of like passes around actually is a cool idea to me.
No, I mean,
yeah.
What do you again, Pastor? Give an example of how in the game that would work.
Well, what he was just saying about how it's this super powerful weapon, and it's the only one the members in the group have, so that different members of the group take turns using it, more or less.
No, I mean, I get that, but give an example of how in the game that would work. Remember, just a reminder, you guys aren't saying this for me. You're saying this for the folks out there. Give them some ideas of what they could do.
That's what I actually hadn't thought about a huge amount before, because, but like, never actually tried it. Different people do have different ways of using things, and this like seeing what the various members of the group would find uses for something.
Introducing magic items that have
that's a cool idea, at least. Never actually tried it.
How do you handle players who find these evolving mechanics exciting? Those who feel frustrated by the uncertainty, and those. All right, then I guess we'll move on to Mar Hawkman here. It's main question again. When introducing magic items that have charges, limited uses, or that adapt as the character grows, how do you handle players who find these evolving mechanics exciting? Those who feel frustrated by the uncertainty, and those who view them as balanced compromise.
To things, but other than I can't think of any time I've ever actually used evolving weapons in a game like that. Because like there's the idea of like having like upgrades to things, but other than like weapon upgrade type things, I've never actually used anything like that in a TTRPG. Which is part of the reason why I brought up the magic rock thing earlier, because it's one of those things I thought of as sort of like a limited use item where, yes, you can keep using it indefinitely, but like once a day, that's sort of a limitation.
Depending what they were suited for. but utility items are more things that one person might make use of. I think it very much depends on the nature of that item. Like with weapons and armor, those are more personal things that I would like give to a specific character, depending on what they were suited for. But utility items are more things that one person might make use of it, but it's basically for the benefit of the party. It's a good way of powering up the character without. But definitely, evolving weapons and general equipment is a pretty good idea, especially like I don't tend to play leveled games that much. So it's a good way of powering up the character without constantly introducing new gear and trivializing the stuff they already have.
Follow up from our Hawkman here.
Plus, you can always build entire adventures around them finding out exactly how something works, have stuff just happen and surprise them at various times.
Making the restrictions actually feel like they're part of world building. So, follow up from our Hawkman here. So, have you ever tied an item's limited uses to, say, character motivations or backgrounds or a cultural theme, making the restrictions actually feel like they're part of world building?
Actually, the specifics of how to use it, not so much, but I've actually had some where you actually have the method of acquisition related to cultural stuff. Actually, the specifics of how to use it, not so much, but like doing like the whole like cultural rituals thing to acquire the weapon. Yes, but I'm actually struggling to think of an example of anything I've done that really properly fits that category.
I didn't really touch on the charge and.
All right, well, that was a quick segment one. Anything you guys want to follow up with with regard to items that have limits, at least initially?
A great way to introduce high-level spells to players. I didn't really touch on charge and limited use items. Basically a spell slot for. I actually really love those on early level because they're a great way to introduce high-level spells to players. Well, in this case, especially players that don't know the magic system, without having them to devote basically a spell slot for it. Like, oh, well, I really like this one spell off this wand. I thought this other spell that I heard was really cool, but now that I'm using it, I don't want it.
Slap a new battery and can be very.
It helps keep from especially new player regret when it comes to your spells.
That is actually an interesting thing.
When and how it's useful to use. Also, disposable items, as opposed to ones that can just slap a new battery and can be very interesting, especially if it's a very precious resource.
Just for sake of argument. That is actually an interesting thing.
When and how it's useful to use. Sorry.
That is an interesting thing I've seen in the past, though. It's like, you have a new magic rock to power your gun. Let's call it a gun, just for sake of argument, that is powered by magic rocks. And every time the magic rock you currently have in the gun runs out of magic juice, you have to go find a new magic rock to power your gun. Kind of a vague example, but
normally I do some commentary.
Or something that simply will not be replaced.
Well, I mean, if you don't know where to find another magic rock.
So one of the things that I want to put out there is, yes, you're going to hear me mention the word a lot. So I'm going to, normally I do some commentary at the end, but I think my commentary is going to be too long. So I'm actually going to make myself a panelist at the moment here. So one of the things that I want to put out there is, yes, you're going to hear me mention the word a lot, at least with this segment, because that's kind of the impetus for it. And for me. But let's bring this to a D&D concept, which is kind of what the topic is about. One of the things that I do is, I'm with Doc Flamingo on this. I don't like handing out magic items to low-level characters. You'll probably have one by the time you're level 5, but level 3 is iffy, and level 1 definitely not. I don't even care if it's some sort of written module or something. I will rip it out. You will not get it because I just don't believe in that. Now, if I know that you're going to have to fight something that requires a magic item to hit, or if I just want to see if you're good at resource management, I'm going to give you a +1 sword and say it has 20 charges on it. I think that's a great way. Now, you choose when you want to use those charges. You can do that with rings of protection. You're fighting a shadow, you might want to use those charges. You're fighting an orc, I mean, unless you really need that +1, probably hold on to it. Because once it's out, it's out. For me, I think that's a great way of putting magic items out there. You can do that with rings of protection. You can do that with basically anything. You put it out there, and it's like, if you want the benefit of this, you have a low number of charges. For me, like I said, it's about resource management. I like things that are resource that involve resource management. Now, on the more Earth Dawn-y thing that I started talking about before, in Earth Dawn, when you get a magic item, first of all, you have to learn about it. You don't just wield it. Hey, I got a sword +1. Everything's +1 now. No, you have a sword. Now you discovered it's magical. Oh, crap. Now you got to learn about it. Which, by the way, as game masters, guess what? You now have adventures you can craft. Depending if it's specifically a key knowledge. As there are literally deeds for some of the weapons that you must perform. Even getting the key knowledges to go up to the next rank is an adventure that the game master can prepare for them, or just have them stumble across whatever, but it's something that they have to progress for. And then they have to essentially, to use a generic term here, bind themselves to it, which they only have so much power depending on when they get it. To use D&D terms, if you're 5th level, you can bind maybe up to 5 powers. And that's it. A +1 here, +1 there, a bonus to AC here. That's 3 powers right there. Even though it doesn't seem like a lot, they end up adding up over time. I think that's just another way of having an item that the player's going to want to hold on to for a while, and not just throw away when he finds the next better thing. Also makes it fun when they get hooked on phonics, so to speak, and they've got that thing, and somehow it goes missing. Or is it like, we got enough stuff. They spent all that time and energy binding to it. Because effectively, they use experience points to do that. Now, is it worth it for them to go hunt it down? Do you have a whole new side adventure or campaign going on? Or is it like, we got enough stuff here, I don't need that. That's up to you and your campaign.
You always control it.
Other things that you can do is you can throw in, actually, I think we're going to talk about this later, so I'll just gloss over it, but bind elementals to weapons to give it powers. But how long does that elemental stay in there? You have to roll
you always control it.
Boom, can you always control it? Is it something that it's bound and stuck? Is it bound and has a chance to break free every time you use it? Is it bound and, after a year and a day, it gets a chance? Whatever. All these things can add excitement. Now, I know some people be like, oh, that's sick. If it can get away, I don't want it. Yeah, but if you know that you're going to have it for at least a week, maybe up to a year, you don't know. You got good 6 days before you have to be afraid of it, right? It might be good for where you are now. Then maybe you can find somebody else to pawn it off on, like Doc Flamingo would do to his players. Oh no, this is a magic sword. It's a great time. And then the fire elemental goes free and burns everybody. Whatever. But the idea is that use your imagination. You can find a lot of ways to put limits on these things, but still make them interesting, exciting, whether it's long-term growth or immediate satisfaction. And just think of the different powers that could come with something. If you bind a demon to a sword, what kind of powers come with that? I mean, it doesn't just have to be evil dark magic. It could be like, oh, it heals you because you're stealing some of the demon's life force. How angry is he going to be when he pops out? If he pops out.
If you're going with the idea of downsides, is that if you're healing yourself by stealing life force from a demon, are you slowly becoming a demon?
That will make the players reluctant to do it unless it actually matters. That's another. Also, making items somewhat dangerous to use makes them more interesting and makes it more exciting when it comes up. Will make the players reluctant to do it unless it actually matters.
That's absolutely fair.
That's another great way of limiting these things. Plus, also, I mean, I'm very firmly of the belief that if the item isn't worth making a whole history for, it's probably not even really worth having in the game.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. Again, I won't mention the game because I'll make everybody drunk because it is a drinking game here. But in the game I love to mention, that's kind of one of the premises of it. They all have histories. They're what's called named items. Once something's named, it inherently becomes part of the world, part of the history, magical in and of its own nature because, for lack of a better term, it has a soul, so to speak. It's not alive, but you get what I'm saying. Like it is part of the continuity of the universe. It's not just some random sword that somebody made better,
That's it.
it has a history behind it, and it's that history that empowers it.
And somebody probably has it. Yeah, I have a campaign that I haven't run in several years, but I made on several pages and made a little over 300 items, and these are the items that exist in the world. That's it. These are exceedingly rare, and somebody probably has it. And if you try to take it, he's probably going to use it on you. He's going to know he has that. That's another thing I kind of drives me crazy in D&D when you find the super powerful stuff in a pile after the encounter.
Well,
if he has that, he's going to know he has that.
There is always the trope of the enemy who, for some reason, can't use the item, but is keeping it locked away so no one else can use it.
Yes, but if he's the guardian of something particularly powerful, he's probably going to have the means to do that.
Well, that is actually one of those things where certain swords have a curse or blessing or something on them that makes it so that it can't be wielded by demons or something like that.
Items. We'll get into that in a moment. We don't have any super chats for segment 1, but there are a few things that I starred here. So all right. So I know Doc Flamingo is waiting for this. He hasn't said it, but I believe it. Because in segment 2 is going to be about cursed items. We'll get into that in a moment. We don't have any super chats for segment 1, but there are a few things that I starred here. So Daryl says, magic should always be with consequences, in my opinion. I think always is a strong word, but theoretically, I tend to like that. What do you guys think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Magic should be mysterious and dangerous. You should not want to muck around it, if only because it will draw attention to you.
Major tricks, though. I do feel like putting in the caveat of having scales of magic, like minor tricks, like lighting a candle. Sure, whatever. That's a tiny, insignificant cost.
I tend to be a little bit lenient.
Major tricks, though, like relocating a mountain. That's different.
But I don't implement them properly.
Is that just due to like practice?
I like cost of magic. I have a bad habit of not implementing it properly. I tend to be a little bit lenient when it comes to magic in games. I like the consequences, but I don't implement them properly.
Is that just due to like practice, or you don't feel right about it, or what?
And then afterwards, I was like, I should have been more harsh there. So I think it's more of an experience thing. I think it's a bit of a practice thing. I tend to feel I need to be more lenient than I need to, and then afterwards, I was like, shit, I should have been more harsh there.
You wouldn't get a curse.
So I think it's more of an experience thing.
Mid-level. Just saying. He wants to kill him quicker than I do. Next comment, Not Your Echo says, Max only hands out cursed Vorpal swords to low-level characters. That is correct, sir. Actually, no, that'd be Doc. You wouldn't get a cursed Vorpal sword in my game until you're mid-level. Just saying. He wants to kill him quicker than I do. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It's like, you roll the 20, you cut your own head off. Nope, that's your own.
Congratulations.
So what happens when I roll a 1? Yeah, you still cut your own head off.
You know what? Having a weapon do critical fumbles as a magical downside to using what would otherwise be an overpowered sword would be an interesting idea.
I love risk-reward ideas. Some games might go a little too far with it, but I like the idea that this weapon is going to work almost every time you want it to, or maybe weapon is a bad idea. This wand is going to work almost every time you want it to, but if the target rolls, let's say a 1 on or a 20 on a saving throw, or you roll a 1 on some sort of attack roll, or whatever it happens to be, some sort of backlash happens, kind of like Dungeon Crawl Classics, I'm in. I absolutely love that stuff. I think that magic should slowly corrupt you, but I also believe that characters should remain viable. I don't like the fact that, well, my character's useless now because I got 9,000 insanities and 17 toes on my eyebrows or something. Like, what the hell is going on here? Maybe you're shunned a little bit. Maybe you look a little weird. Maybe you turn into a Sith Lord, so to speak. Where is that? But there should be a balance with that.
When you're done with your star chats, will you bring up Pauper's Night comment about Magic the Gathering? I have something to say about that.
Let me go back to that. Goblin Electric. Where is that? He's going to mention Earth Dawn.
Very close to the bottom.
Sir. Many.
Two.
Oh,
two
yeah, I
beneath,
see it. Yep, I see it. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute.
There are a couple things, but it was the magic items
okay.
really turned me on to the
Goblin Electric Mayhem says he's going to mention Earthdawn many times, sir. Many times.
This live stream, but in terms of
actually, it was honestly the magic item. Well, there are a couple things, but it was the magic items in Earthdawn that really turned me on to the game. Now, there are a few other facets. I love the disciplines and the fact that they have a way of thinking, but that's outside the scope of this live stream. But in terms of the magic items, absolutely is one of my favorite things about the game.
How it works. What do you guys think about that?
I suppose it would depend on
Goblin Electric Mayhem says, if any item is identified, you should be able to use all powers right from that moment on. If you're just randomly guessing, then you should have a limited chance to figure out how it works. What do you guys think about that?
I suppose it would depend on the nature of the item. I mean, I could see that in some cases, but some things. I mean, it kind of depends on the nature of the campaign and the game you're playing. But I might hold off on certain things. I mean, it would. It depends on the nature of the spell, how powerful the item is. Some things might be deliberately kept from you, especially if you're dealing with like some kind of like holy or demonic weapon, or something where you have to, where something might not even necessarily have certain powers until you accomplish certain goals or do certain things. And I think a lot depends on like the character's investment with it. Like, does the character just cast a spell? Okay, it does this, this, and this, which might be fine for some things, or do they really look into it? Do they like train with it? Do they like take the time to like bond with the item? A lot would depend on the player's behavior if it was a really powerful item with me.
I'm trying to remember what the name of the story was, and it's escaping me. But I remember once where it was a ring that was said to be a ring of protection, but it didn't ever specify protection from what. And then the heroes had to find out the hard way what the ring was protecting them from by getting hit by whatever it was supposed to protect them from. And until they got hit by that, they just didn't know.
Well, that is a
Which in this case
method.
turned out to be dragon firewalls.
Well, that is a method. I do believe that if you can hand out a ring like that, there should be some sort of research that you can do to get that more nuance. It shows as what would abjuration, in D&D, it'd show up as an abjuration ring, but you want to know more about it, you should be able to do some sort of research on that somehow, some way,
or have something planned that's going to come up where you
if I
figure it
remember
out.
right, the story played that to comedic effect by having them try to research it and fail. Or that Daffy Duck.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a critical failure or something, for sure, you might think it's the opposite thing. Hey, this protects us from fire. What was it, that Rick and Morty one? I'm protected from acid. And then they dump him in acid and he dies. I mean,
or that Daffy Duck
move on to the next one.
Space versus Marvin Martian thing, where Daffy Duck is wearing a disintegration-proof vest. The vest doesn't disintegrate. Daffy does.
Well, I mean, Crafting Gamer talked about a time factor. What are some other factors?
All right, let's move on to the next one.
That you could use. Now, again,
Goblin Electric Mayhem also says, why would you go by level to open powers in an item and not some other factors? Well, I mean, Crafting Gamer talked about a time factor. What are some other factors you guys think that that you could use? Now, again, if you're going to talk about another game, go ahead and bring that up. Otherwise, we're baselining this to Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, I don't play level games that much, so with me, powers would be more likely a powering up item would more likely be tied to something you did with it, so somewhere it was brought and exposed to. Someone might have to unlock it. There might be command words or phrases involved. Things like I would handle it like that more than strictly by level. I like to minimize the interaction of numbers in the game as much as possible. So I don't want it to become math. For example, if I give somebody a +3 sword, I'm never going to tell them it's a +3 sword. It's a magic sword. It's really nice. It's a very high quality. Well, what's the bonus? It's got something. Don't worry about that. You seem to be hitting more and better. Be happy. Because I don't want the game to become a numbers crunch, because then it gets very video gamey, and it shouldn't be about that. It should be more about the narrative and what's taking place than than the numbers, strictly speaking.
You can also use that as an
Okay, what game do you run?
I run my own games.
Oh, okay,
For
okay.
the most part.
Magically special, but see, that's actually one of those things where I find it to be an interesting double-edged sword sort of thing, where you can also use that as an argument for why you should have more items that are not magically special, but they're just like magically
just be a masterwork weapon,
forged weapons, where it's like it has an edge that's just slightly sharper because someone sharpened it using magic, and it's not really enchanted, but whoever made it using methods that are out of the ordinary.
Or
wouldn't that just be a masterwork weapon?
Just because
I mean, that's kind of the point I was getting at, though, is that it's not something that makes it special. It just makes it something better than what you otherwise would have.
Back to Tolkien, a lot of the stuff isn't. Or might just have extraordinary abilities just because it was made with techniques or materials that aren't otherwise available. That works a lot too. Like, for example, going back to Tolkien, a lot of the stuff isn't, a lot of the magical items that are encountered in those stories aren't like they didn't, okay, I'm going to make a plus this of that. It was just that it was special because of the person who made it and because of their talents and because of the materials they used.
Kind of like a Dragonlance?
Yeah.
Because was it Theros Ironfield? I forget his name. The silver arm blacksmith, yada yada.
In Tolkien, certain items are special because of who has wielded them in the past, not solely because of how they were made. Like the sword Sting. It's an artifact that predated the War of Wrath. It's elven masterwork craftsmanship that can't rust, so it hasn't rusted away in the thousands of years since it was made. And it being that old is what makes it special.
New abilities depending on what happens with it. Yes, I'm definitely a big believer in that, especially when it comes to things like armor and weapons. Like its history, especially something, it might be magical, it might become more powerful or take on new abilities depending on what happens with it, or who wields it. It could take on properties from as it progresses through its history. That's a very interesting thing to do with them sometimes,
especially in black or red. Okay, let's hit this last one up. This is the one that Crafting Gamer wanted to see. He said, when I look at Popper Knight says, when I look at magic cards, many cards do an effect, but have a negative cost, especially in black or red.
Okay, we got a robot.
I can throw out a few quick examples.
Hold on, let Crafting Gamer go first. This was he wanted this one, then everybody can jump in after that. Go ahead, Crafting Gamer.
Oh, I get a minus to. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you?
Yes, we can hear you.
I might turn into. Okay, well, you guys get a little robotic for me. Here's the thing about Magic the Gathering. Oh, I cut curse or bad things. Oh, by the way, thanks to these. Okay, regular curse item. Oh, I get a minus to this, or I might turn into a monster temporarily, or something like that. Magic the Gathering, bad things. Oh, I cut off my arm. Because that's not. Oh, by the way, thanks to these other combinations, that arm's turned into a snake, which turned into a dragon, which now has death touch. Oh, and by the way, if it hits you for 1 point of damage, you immediately lose.
No, that's not a curse.
Those are the type of curses I don't want in any of my games. Because that's not, oh, I'm cursed. That's, oh, how do I backlash the reverse of that so I hit you even harder?
What I was going with, I was thinking,
that's not a curse.
Was how certain things will have like additional costs or downsides. Like Red's cards will often be like fireball spells that kill everything in the realm, including whoever casts them.
Oh yeah, but oh yeah, well that does like come back to a tiny bit, but what I'm referring to is like, because those are the only cards that hurt the caster as well, are the field wipes that are guaranteed to hurt the caster, I should say, unless he has something to defend his creatures. Or like a discard cards. Oh, I discarded a card. By the way, that basically I cut off my arm and it turned into this big fucking creature.
Yeah.
Or I lose the turn next round. I just give you that cursed item. You instantly lose the game.
All right, let's make sure. Hold on a second. Let's make sure that we're keeping this. And I understand, and I don't mind the Magic Gathering examples. You can pull examples from wherever you want. But let's make sure we're putting this in a role-playing context. For if you don't want to talk Dungeons and Dragons, that's fine. Palladium's close enough to Dungeons and Dragons in this regard that but let's make sure we're still putting this in the context of a role-playing game.
Yeah. That's why I was going with
I'm
the
referring
fireball
to
thing.
is someone goes, okay. Well, the context I'm referring to overall is he's saying that Magic the Gathering has bad effects. You can't actually say that in Magic the Gathering, because if you had the way that stuff interacts with each other in a role-playing game, you would literally have someone goes, okay, I rip off my finger and then it does this OP effect.
It's not that powerful.
So I did one negative thing and I get to do I instantly kill Tiamat.
Okay.
I just ripped off my finger through it and I killed Tiamat.
What are your thoughts on this?
This is the equivalent of what Magic the Gathering can do.
It's not that powerful. You ready for it?
In your day it wasn't. Now it is.
Once again, has blood magic. There's something in the game called a targeting eye. I use this as an example because it's the grossest one. The targeting eye is a gem with a worm in it.
Gross.
You put it over your eye so you look like a pirate. The gem or the worm then buries into your eye, it devours your eye and replaces your eye. But from that point forward, you get +2 to all ranged attacks.
You go to like a Palladium Atlantis, and that's like a common theme.
Yeah, right.
It's basically
like
a sort of organic prosthetic.
Yeah, you go to
that could
you
have
go to like a
interesting effects,
Palladium
especially if there's a lot of items like that. Like, what does this start
Atlantis,
doing
and that's
to
like a
you
common
if
theme
you
there.
do this
Warhammer does
all
that sort of
the
thing
time?
with chaos
Or what,
artifacts a lot.
downsides are there to that?
I
Yeah, that could have interesting effects, especially if there's a lot of items like that. Like, what does this start doing to you if you do this all the time? Or what, downsides are there to that?
Even more powerful attacks. But I don't remember if it was actually Warhammer or not. I remember one where there was this cursed sword where it's actually a very powerful weapon that borrows life force from its wielder in order to do even more powerful attacks. But the catch is that it slowly fuses with your hand. You see where this is going, I'm sure. You need to going back to the Magic the Gathering thing. With black, a lot of those are things that are essentially ritual magic, and translating them into D&D terms, it would be like saying you need to cast a spell to weaken an enemy by killing a rat.
Kills a human, you have to kill a human.
But you actually have to have a live rat to kill in order to cast the spell on your enemy. In D&D terms, it's weird ritual magic that has physical cost.
So in order to cast a spell that kills a human, you have to kill a human.
If I remember correctly.
It's one of those things where it's. So in D&D terms, it's weird ritual magic that has physical cost to it that aren't just like using a spell.
Segment 4, if I remember correctly. Is it 3 or 4?
With regards to that, if power or something, I would let.
Oh, it's segment 3. Segment 3. We can
Well,
talk.
if I could just jump in and address somebody. Goblin Electric Mayhem. With regards to that, if the sword had a particular power or did something, I would let them know that. I just say I don't like getting into the numbers of it. Like, I wouldn't tell you it's a +3 sword. Just that it's a magical sword. It seems to help. Just because I don't like over mathing it. But if it did something in particular, like it could immolate and burst into the flames, I would tell you that. It's just I try to minimize reducing it down to numbers.
Kind of have to.
Is what I was referring to.
And that a lot of that has to do with
the have to have those numbers.
The game you're playing, the type of game you're playing. If you're playing a game that requires those numbers, say like D&D 3rd edition, Pathfinder, whatever, kind of have to. But if you're not, if you're playing something more maybe dice poolish, don't necessarily have to have those numbers so much. So I think the type of game you're playing matters. But I would like to jump us into segment 2 here in a moment, if you guys are good with that.
Do you think you're better than me?
So,
okay, that's easy. Do you think you're better than our
it's up
panel?
on the screen here.
If you or someone you know has presence and charisma, the ability to educate and
Right.
entertain, a solid AV
So, do you want to join us? Do you want to be on one of these panels? Do you think you're better than me? Okay, that's easy. Do you think you're better than our panelists? If you or someone you know has presence and charisma, the ability to educate and entertain, a solid AV setup free from noise, and a passion for discussing tabletop RPGs, join the Game Master Insight Discord. Link is in the description. We want to meet you, learn about your interests, and maybe bring you on the show to share your experiences. If you enjoy this discussion, please like this video, subscribe to all the panelists' channels, which you can find in the description.
Crafting Gamer. When introducing cursed
All right,
items that
segment 2 is going to be about cursed items.
How do you appeal to those who
And we will be starting with the Crafting Gamer on this one. That's right, Doc, you have to wait until last on the... So, Crafting Gamer. When introducing cursed items that intentionally impose challenges or hardships, how do you appeal to those who enjoy the added tension, those who find the curse frustrating, and those who appreciate a careful balance between danger and injury?
I can absolutely understand that.
Well, yeah, in my opinion, this is where once again, maxing out there for a little bit. I do consider rune weapons cursed items. Very few people agree with me.
Okay.
Because in my opinion,
I can understand that. Just to be clear, I can absolutely understand that.
In my opinion, there are very, very few that are worth the bad side. But very few people agree with me.
Okay.
But there's two caveats. And a little bit of an example is a story of it's a basically a story in Palladium book, but it's a really good story about how the players can get their hands on a small cache of rune weapons. But there's two caveats.
Okay.
One, every single rune weapon does terrible shit
I can remember only two
to the player in some way, or the character should say in some way, all but one, or you straight instantly die.
One of the rune weapons, anytime you had any
food
on you while you had this rune weapon, it would
okay,
run away in
quick.
less than 24 hours.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first off,
So
I can remember only two weapons, but all of them had along this same gist.
Another one,
All but one.
you would destroy,
Which was
it would destroy
one of the
any
rune weapons.
clothing
Anytime you had
48
any
hours,
food on you while you had
armor
this rune
within a
weapon,
week.
it would rot away in less than 24 hours.
It would just dissolve your clothing.
So you
whatever
could
had.
not carry
And it
food
was-
with you.
what
period.
item was it?
Another
Both
one.
were rune weapons.
You would destroy. It would
weapons
destroy
that
any
destroyed your
clothing you had
clothes.
within 48 hours and any
That was their
armor
curse.
within a week.
One
weird,
of them
okay.
destroyed your clothes.
Is it would
and
just
also
dissolve
destroyed
your cloak,
armor, and it
whatever
said
you
it
were wearing.
destroyed magic
And it was what item was it?
Both were
The
rune
other
weapons.
one, rotted food within 24
They're
hours. You could not
weapons that
even
destroyed your
preserve food, it would
clothes.
rot away within 24 hours.
That was their curse.
Like, okay, you have
One
weird,
of them
okay.
destroyed your clothes, and it also destroyed your armor. And it said it destroyed
all
magical
has, like,
armor.
6 rune weapons in there, and all of them had curses along that line.
The other one, rotted food within 24 hours. You could not
Well,
even
except
preserve
the
food;
well,
would
there's
rot
actually
away within
the
24
seventh
hours.
rune.
It's like,
Seventh rune
okay,
weapon
you
is
have
where I
starvation
come
and you
into
have
my very
nudity.
first
Those are your two
TPK as a
curses.
GM.
And all has like 6
Now,
rune
I
weapons in there,
warned
and all
one
of
the
them had
players
curses
that
along
rune
that
weapon
lines.
had an evil aura. Like, I'm a
But
little
except
too
the
soft
well,
on
there's
the
actually
first
7.
GM,
The
so I warned,
7th
don't do
rune.
that. When the player's like,
7th
"Oh, I
rune
pick it
weapon
up,"
is where I come into my very first
you instantly
TPK as
are
a GM.
possessed by the rune.
Now, I warned one of the
by the
players
rune,
that
and
rune
then you
weapon
are,
had an evil aura.
an
Like,
NPC
I'm
that
a little
tries to
too
kill the
soft when I
party,
was a first
and you
GM,
were
so
the
I warned him,
size
don't do
of
that.
a giant.
When the player's like, oh, I pick it up. You instantly are possessed by
The entire
by the
party,
rune,
instead of running for their lives upon
by the
seeing
rune,
this,
and then you
basically
are
pulled a Bruce with the
an
blue dragon.
NPC that tries to kill the party, and you were the size
My
of
first
a
and
giant.
only TPK, because the party would not run away.
Okay.
They
The
grabbed
entire
rune
party,
weapons, and
instead
it
of running for
specifically
their
says
lives
in the
upon
book,
seeing this,
the rune weapons
basically
will have
pulled a
half
Bruce with the
effect
blue
on
dragon.
this creature, because it is a living rune creature.
my first and only TPK, because the party would not run
the rune
away.
literally takes over the body of the person.
They grabbed the rune weapons,
picks
and
it
it
up,
is specifically
and
says in the
transforms
book,
it into a
the rune
giant,
weapons will have
but you are
half effect
literally
on this
the
creature because it
rune's
is a
human,
living
well, it's a
rune
giant
creature.
form. So it actually takes half damage from magic.
The rune literally
Rune
takes
weapon.
over the body of the person who
It is incredibly
picks it up
resistant to psionics,
and
which
transforms
they
them
have
into a
anyway.
giant. But you
The
are
only thing that
literally
really affects
the
it is with
rune's
straight blunt weapons,
human,
but it's
well, I
not
say
like-
giant
no,
form.
blunt weapons, straight weapons, but it's not like those
So
are
it
much
actually
damage to
takes
begin
half
with.
damage from magic,
It even
including
says in the
rune
book,
weapons.
the player should probably
It is
run.
incredibly resistant to psionics, which they didn't have any anyway. The only thing that
And one of
really
the
affects
players
it
just
is
grabbed
straight
this
blunt
rune weapon
weapons,
and
but it's not like
Bye.
no blunt weapons, straight
gone.
weapons, but it's not like those are going to do much damage to begin with. It even says in the book the player should probably run
as bad as this sounds, the entire party was like, "Holy shit!"
And one of the players just grabbed this rune weapon, and bye, you're gone.
Curses can be fun when they come out of the blue. Have you ever introduced?
As bad as this sounds, the entire party was like, "Holy shit!" That was awesome.
This is a story.
I mean, curses can be fun when they come out of the blue. Have you ever introduced?
No. Sorry, I should say there was one player that didn't agree with that, and that was the one who got taken over by the weapon. This is a story I told a while back where one of the females of the party said I was a sexist and slapped me across the face.
Was this the melting clothes item? Because I get to see how that was taken.
I told you the rune was evil.
No, one of the other parties took the.
I did a stupid thing as GM and told you not to pick it up blatantly.
Of course, like I said, they got
and you ignored me.
By the giant rune.
Was this the melting clothes item? Because I get to see how that was taken.
Well,
no, one of the other parties took the. One of the other party members took the melting clothes weapon. Of course, like I said, they got killed by the giant rune monster anyway.
It's a money sink.
But the party had already divided up the rune weapons. One of them was like, "Oh, I don't care about melting clothes. I got magic armor. It'll last a week. I just keep getting it repaired."
With this is that
like,
having a game.
Max's favorite rune weapon right there. It's a money sink.
Greek tragedy kind of story.
I got magic armor. Great. You got to keep that thing repaired, otherwise you will have it gone in a week.
Were you entertained? What occurs to me with this is that having a game end in a horrific death is kind of like the whole Greek tragedy kind of story where yes, things went horribly badly, but were you entertained along the way?
A mini campaign, as I like to call them, basically a specialty one shot.
Well, the party that didn't get turned into a rune monster was like, "Hey, yeah, this is awesome." That was like, we got to come back with our party and get back our stuff at some point. It's like, you guys realize this was technically a mini campaign, as I like to call them, basically a specialty one shot.
You introduce conditions.
You'll never see this cave again.
Either prompting players to reevaluate the approach to the item.
I don't know. They might have had a GM that played them out later, but
speeding up the fact that they got to remove.
Well, let me ask you this follow up here. Have you introduced conditions under which a curse evolves, either prompting players to reevaluate the approach to the item, or maybe speeding up the fact that they got to remove the curse, or oh crap, we're on a time limit to complete XYZ mission? Anything where the curse evolves with, or maybe as they get more powerful and they're like, yeah, I can control it better, the curse gets more powerful with them?
Some other things, it's like, I should have thought of that. And that's definitely
admittedly, I haven't thought of doing that. It's a really good idea. I kind of wish I had, but.
All right, well, you guys have any questions, comments, concerns for Crafting Gamer?
A few things I thought of as a GM as a kid, but some other things, it's like, I should have thought of that. And that's definitely falls in the category. That's a good idea. I should have thought of that.
Any downside would probably increase.
All right, well, you guys have any questions, comments, and concerns for Crafting Gamer?
Well, if I was going to, especially if I was going to use some kind of evolving magic item, especially a weapon, any downside would probably increase with it as well. It would become more and more dangerous to use as it became more powerful. My rule set was the player was a magic sword.
Oh, that's kind of
One interesting. I didn't play in this campaign. It was a solo game. A friend of mine ran using my rule set. Was the player was a magic sword?
Oh, that's kind of cool. So how did that work out?
Well, he was able to upgrade himself because he had all these settings for gemstones. And basically, what he was basically going from owner to owner, looking for someone who was physically powerful enough but mentally pliant enough that he could basically take over the body. And he was constantly looking for these enchanted gems that he got mounted in himself. And that's basically how he powered up during the course of the campaign. I think it was fairly short. I think it only ran 10 adventures, but it was a really interesting idea. Another thing is you could have a player be an item like that, especially an intelligent item. There's all kinds of interesting things you can do with magic items.
That is actually an interesting thing with the idea of having players act as artificers too, is that the artificer has their special weapon that they built, and then as the story goes, they find ways to make it more powerful.
Feels more earned. That can really get a player invested in an item too. half buried in a pile of dragon. Something you make yourself is always more interesting and more
All right,
feels more earned.
Swap on over to Mar Hockman,
as opposed to just something you ran across because it's half buried in a pile of dragon dung.
How do you appeal to those who enjoy the added tension? Those who find the curse frustrating.
All right, let's swap on over to Mar Hockman. Ask him the question, which is when introducing cursed items that intentionally impose challenges or hardships, how do you appeal to those who enjoy the added tension? Those who find the curse frustrating, and those who appreciate a careful balance between danger and intrigue.
To them, which could be considered a curse. And one thing that was a distinction that we kind of brought up during the discussion of part 1 is the difference between items that have a downside to them, which could be considered a curse, and items that are just straight up a trap in general.
What do you mean?
Okay, sorry. Well, Crafting Gamer gave that example of a cloak that kind of like does horrible things to you just because
the cloak was Doc.
Oh, it was Doc. Okay, sorry. But I mean, that's an item where it was introduced. It's not, kind of like what Crafting Gamer said about how he told players that the rune on that particular weapon was evil and that they shouldn't try to use it because, which again, it's more of a trap gimmick. It's not something. It's one of those things where it's there to give the players a choice to make and see if they choose to do something dumb. That a lot of people would decide wasn't worth which again, it's more of a trap gimmick than something you actually want them to use. Or seen magic items and. But then you have the other category where it's things that just it's a downside that a lot of people would decide wasn't worth it. But some people might decide was worth it. Like in Hyperborea games, I've seen magic items that had some like pretty hefty downsides to them. Although one of those magic items was it was a helmet that would get fused to your head. Removing it would require you to have a person cast healing spells on you to repair the damage to your head if you remove it, and having it on your head, well, let's just say it doesn't look like a normal helmet. But it does actually work a lot better than a normal helmet. So you might decide it was worth it. And that was something that we had someone in the party use for quite a long time. Because, again, once you put it on, taking it off just isn't a good idea.
Hence, they're going to want to actually employ it. But you want them to be reluctant. It's always a matter of finding the sweet spot with an item like that. It's you want the temptation there, you want it to be useful, because hence they're going to want to actually employ it, but you want them to be reluctant.
And also, it's like, don't make it a surprise. He put it on. He decided it was worth it.
Well, it depends. That there's surprises and there's surprises.
Because like this is one of those things where the person knew it had a negative side effect before he put it on. He decided it was worth it, but one of my personal favorite examples is something from Diablo 2 that was actually a cursed ring in a pre-MMO version of a computer game that it actually had such a hefty downside to it that the developers disabled it so that you couldn't actually get it in the game. There's this thing called the constricting ring. Stupidly high level item that gave you a stupidly high amount of resistance to elemental damage. And that's the upside. The downside is that it will kill you no matter what. If you don't have an item to offset the fact that it is slowly I said slowly, sorry, it's quickly draining your life force, like 30 hit points a second, and that's a high enough amount in Diablo 2 that you would die within 10 or 15 seconds of wearing the thing. And of course, people would not if you don't have something to offset the life drain. Because you can just look at the item and it's like, oh. Anyway, though, I was just picking that as an example of something that, yes, you might want to use that, or maybe not. And of course, people would not have the life drain be a surprise to them, because you can just like look at the item and it's like, oh, it's this thing.
In a heartbeat. Well, my take on that is there should always be at least a reason to be suspicious. I wouldn't do that. I will punish a player for being careless or greedy in a heartbeat.
What about
I wouldn't just like, oh, you found this cool ring, oh, put it on, and your head falls off. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Amusing though it would be. I don't think to be in the situation.
What about the Richard Rahl thing from Wizard's First Rule? I forget. I think it was the second or third book. When they put that choker on him, anytime he tried to do anything, it zapped him. It's been a long time since I read the series, so I don't remember the exact effect, but yeah, basically anytime, if I remember correctly, anytime he tried to cast a magic spell, it would knock him to his knees. It'd make like every nerve ending shoot on fire.
Far enough advanced, yada yada. You looks like magic, right?
Oh, we have one of those for our dog when he tries to leave the yard. He definitely agrees with the
So now remember, I forget how the exact quote works, but you know, any technology far enough advanced, yada yada, you looks like magic, right? So now that you have a magic collar on your dog, imagine taking that to the 12th century.
Or for a time, you might have to figure out ways to avoid. That sounds like a very fun item, especially a whole adventure trying to get around it, or trying to get it off. There's all kinds of things you can do with items like that. Or for a time, you might just have to figure out ways to avoid putting yourself in that situation. You might lose some abilities for a while until you find a way around that, or find a way to escape. That can be very interesting.
So,
A powerful character.
Have you used in-world legends, whispering
and force them to find other ways to deal with things while they figure out how to deal with this situation?
Origin, something that they can maybe even use to their advantage.
So, Mar Hockman, I'm going to ask you: Have you used in-world legends, whispering spirits, mysterious warnings, etc., to create anticipation around uncovering a curse's origin, something that they can maybe even use to their advantage?
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like you put environmental clues in the environment in a story where it's like, here's a thing, here's something that its former owner had scrawled in a notebook about it. If you look around the room.
All right. Anything else you guys want to add on that?
Well, curse items.
I can't always tell when you guys are done.
My view on curse items.
Start doing the army thing.
Like just
over.
It should always be something that has.
All right. Anything else you guys want to add on that?
To be, as opposed to just somebody's. Well, cursed items. My view on curse items is I don't like just straight cursed items. It should always be something that has a reason for it to be, as opposed to just somebody's pulling a prank. I mean, there could be, I suppose, some circumstances where somebody just makes something that's just outright awful. But for the most part, it's probably going to be a side effect of something, or they implemented some kind of magic that was just so inherently dangerous because they're grasping for power that it has these downsides. A perfect example is, like, for instance, the Elric story, Stormbringer. It's immensely powerful. It overcomes his physical frailties, but it kind of makes him kill everybody he cares about, and ultimately makes him a pariah because nobody wants to be anywhere near him, and it ultimately kills him. And that's a great example. And he could have gotten rid of it at any time, and he knew what he was dealing with, but it was just so useful.
Sword that
he thought he could get away with it, and eventually he didn't.
There's a lot of creative downsides you can have things like that, though, because like one that I saw in a I think it was a Hyperborea game was a sword that actually reduced your chance to hit when you're doing attack rolls. Like, yes, it's a sword that hits really hard, but yeah,
for example, a really powerful sword that
it's a manageable downside that people would think twice about using, but depending on the players, the players
controlling that, but not necessarily always. things, and then it becomes, can I handle it? Yeah, I think I can manage it.
The thing Jade mentioned is actually what I would categorize as a surprise. That's kind of sort of a trap, but you don't necessarily realize it yet. Yeah, because like he did like whole like, hey, it's a magic sword that kills things really good. Oh yeah, by the way, it's actually the prison of a lich, and every time you kill someone with it, you're feeding the lich, and he'll eventually revive.
So I was in a game back in the 90s when I was in Korea, and the dungeon master gave one of the characters, I think it was a rod, well, it was a stick basically, but it was a magic, used as a magic weapon. And anytime he hit something, the thing had to make a saving throw, and if it failed its save, it got put into the stick. He could either beat it to death or it'd eventually end up in the stick, right? However, it could only carry so many. If I remember correctly, every day it was different. So if he rolled low, things would just pop out and it'd start attacking again. Other days he could fill that thing up. You're like, so it kind of was a bit of a chaos item. And he figured about how many he could have in there and be relatively safe, where maybe at most we'd have to deal with one. So he was careful with it. But something like that, where it's like, hey, I don't know how many souls this thing can take. And what happens if I overcharge it, so to speak? Does something pop out? Does the sword, or does the stick blow up? I mean, a bunch of different things that people can do with regard to that. Is that cursed?
I think that the word cursed situations like
well, I would categorize that as something that has a powerful effect with an equally powerful downside.
Sure. Is it cursed?
But how do mundane people see it?
I think that the word cursed in situations like that is just an individual balancing point.
Sure.
Is it cursed?
But how do mundane people see it?
If the downside was greater than the upside, one thing that I don't remember what it was. It's like it was a way of categorizing magic weapons in a game where it would consider something cursed if the downside was greater than the upside, and so on and so forth. And it turned out in the long term that
sociological sense, though,
whether an upside was worth the downside often depended on what the player was planning on doing with it, and not so much the actual.
Sure, but in a sociological sense, though, if every time you dealt damage, it would inflict extra damage. Let's just say your game does D6 damage, but this sword does 2d6 damage because it's you've got the magic sword of masochism. However, you always take 1 point. For whatever reason, you always take 1 point. Is that a cursed sword? I mean, somebody in society, forget game mechanics. Now it's up to you to somebody who's like, oh, you've got the sword of masochism. Don't touch it, for it will suck your life from you. They don't realize it just takes 1 hit point from you, but it could be described by the masses out there as a cursed sword. Now it's up to you to decide if it really is cursed or not.
Another thing with that particular one is like having it drain only 1 hit point per whatever interval. If it's an ordinary peasant who only has 5 hit points, that's a lot scarier than a mighty hero who has like 30 or 40.
Those who love that tension, those who find curses frustrating, and those who hate. Well, hey, let's get Doc in on the conversation here. Ask him the question. All right, Doc. When introducing cursed items that intentionally impose challenges or hardships, how do you appeal to those who love that tension? Those who find curses frustrating, and those who, like a good balance in the middle.
And this is what you came across. Enjoy it or not. Take from this what you will. I don't it's for me. It's a narrative thing. And deal with it as you will. And the player, I don't want to really tailor it to like, do I think this guy's going to enjoy this or not? It is what it is. Have their own reaction to it, and deal with it as you will. I might hate it. You might think, "Oh my God, I have to get rid of this thing," or you might be, "I can deal with this," or But it's allowing the player to have their own reaction to it is part of the fun of it. But I'm not going to specifically tell her like, oh, I better not do this because this guy only wants nice things and doesn't want to deal with it. No, in fact, that's probably exactly the kind of attitude that's going to get me to give you something nasty.
Perceives as an unfair burden.
When a player complains about a cursed item feeling too punitive, do you adjust the situation? That becomes like a compelling obstacle rather than what he perceives as an unfair burden.
I would say I would look into it, find out what you can do. Is it something you can just get rid of? And oh well, it was really cool, but I'm not willing to deal with this. Or is it something you're stuck with? Well, maybe there's a way to get unstuck, and look into that.
Yeah, that's something we mentioned earlier. That's a big thing with items that have hefty downsides. Is that if the players don't need to use the item and can just like throw it in a treasure chest in their home base and forget about it.
Like for example, you could have thrown the ring
I mean,
of power
if the players have to use the item, then the downside suddenly becomes story breaking.
Well, it depends. Also, are we dealing with an intelligent item? Okay, I'm done with it. Like for example, you could have thrown the ring of power into the ocean, but it had power and will of its own. It would have found its way to someone. You might lock it in a chest in your dungeon and think, okay, I'm done with it. Then the maid finds it. There's all kinds of ways to deal with that.
It actually got shown in the movie version that someone did once throw the ring of power into the ocean, and then a fish carried it to shore so that someone could find it laying on the seashore.
Every GM has magic items too close to the sun and ever.
All right, let me interject here for just a moment. We got a $20 Rumble rant over on the Rumble side from Grizzly Beardo. I wish I could put it up on the screen, but I cannot.
What's your favorite D-equipment?
Says every GM has magic items too close to the sun and ever
magic item
ever have a magic item
what's your favorite
too close to the sun and realize they needed to pull it back? What's your favorite de-equipping of the party? Sorry, that first sentence is a little hard for me to read, Grizzly Beardo. Every GM has magic item too close to the sun and realize they needed to pull it back. What's your favorite de-equipping of the party's story?
Magic items too close.
Go ahead. We'll just start with Doc.
And realize they need to pull it back. So it could be, whoa, I gave you too many.
I think you're muted
again. Sorry, could you repeat that? I don't think I entirely understood.
So every GM has magic items too close to the sun and realize they need to pull it back. So it could be, whoa, I gave you too many, and now I somehow need to reel this in a little bit. So what's your favorite de-equipping of the party story? Now, to be fair, I'm gonna. I know it's not the words you put in there, but it doesn't always have to be take stuff away.
Especially if you're dealing with something that has.
Could make some things useless just by. Sorry, we're not fighting undead anymore. Yeah.
It might that, or it could be destroyed. There's a lot of things you can do. I mean, you might have to destroy it to accomplish a goal. Like to be very sparse, especially if you're dealing with something that has some major downside to it, some sort of curse to it. It might belong to someone who comes looking for it. There's a lot of things you can do. I mean, this is one of the reasons I like to be very sparse in awarding items, because it's easier to sell a buff than a debuff. And I don't like getting put in that position, but if you absolutely have to, there's all manner of things you can do to eliminate a dangerously powerful item.
Well, in the context of story important items, having the story important item get destroyed as part of the story, despite it being something the players found to be highly useful as a weapon or whatever. I mean, going back to the One Ring example, yes, the One Ring is useful, but the story says you have to throw it in Mount Doom. But okay, 2 different times this happened. One of them was Rust Monsters, where someone had a really cool sword. I mean, in terms of Hyperborea games I played, we did actually have one where it wasn't really intentional, but okay, 2 different times this happened. One of them was Rust Monsters, where someone had a really cool sword and made the mistake of hitting a Rust Monster in the head with it. Used to have a cool sword. I think it ate his armor. Then someone got. Then we had. Right. The one guy. Okay, so that makes 3. One guy got had a Jello cube land on his head. That one, I think it ate his armor, and most of them didn't. Then we had one where a guy had like an acid spitting worm spit acid on him, which he had to roll a saving throw for every single item he was carrying.
The trick is,
and most of them didn't make it.
Want to avoid. Yeah, and also creating a situation where where a player has the option to give it up to accomplish something can be very useful. You don't want to. The trick is, if you're going to do that, you want to avoid. I'm just snatching this back from you because I'm being a dick. That's I really think is the trick to it.
Well, that is actually a pretty common trope, though. It's like giving an item to an NPC as a payment to get the NPC to help the players with something as part of the story.
Yeah, that's an excellent one. Somebody might demand something you need for something you really need. That's another great way to handle that.
Most of the time I give out lots of little things. It isn't until much later.
All right, anything you want to... go ahead, Crafting Gamer.
I was just saying, before you get anything that's substantial. I've never gave out more magic items I've ever really regretted. But with that said, most of the time I give out lots of little things. It isn't until much later.
Stupid players, but it's Bruce's Blue Dragon story.
You're going to be fighting dragons before you get anything that's substantial enough to be a real threat to me as a GM. But with that said, the favorite one I have so far, it's a story more of stupid players, but it's Bruce's Blue Dragon story. This is definitely how I'd handle it.
Yeah,
I would tempt them, and I know a few of them would because they're players, to go through to some place they know they shouldn't. And then the other side, oh, by the way, I'm far more powerful than you. Just leave your shit here and I won't kill you.
Great potential adventure.
Yeah.
Do you really want it back? How bad do you want it back? Sword jacked by a dragon.
Yep.
All right, anything, Doc?
And that could be another great potential adventure hook. Do you really want it back? How bad do you want it back? For me, it's It should always.
All right, anything, Doc? Because I know you were kind of focused on the curse side of stuff earlier. Is there anything about cursed items you want to add to this, or should we move to the next segment?
Just that for me, it should always be a temptation to keep it. It should, just like screw you, you're cursed isn't terribly interesting to me unless the curse is part of the narrative that you're trying to overcome. But it's really useful. They should always kind of want to keep it. That's what makes a cursed item. That's what makes a good cursed item. I really like this sword that eats people's souls. It's really useful, but I did kill 4 of my henchmen the other day. I'm starting to get a bad reputation. That's the kind
Henchmen are about to become expensive for somebody, huh?
Yeah.
Or they just refuse. Like the union says no.
They've got your picture up when you go to the hall.
It's like bad checks. Do not accept money from this guy. It's no good. You'll never see it. So I start a few things here. I got this first one. All right. Well, let's get ready to go on to the next segment, which will be about powerful artifacts that guide but do not overpower. So before we do that, again, no super chats. So I start a few things here. I got this first one here. I just want to be clear before I put this up here. I got a few of these comments. It wasn't just one, and I got them mostly during segment 1. So either the people are gone or it stopped. I don't know. But apparently, I'm not hearing it. But I have misophonia. If I heard this, these guys know, anybody who's ever been on a panel of mine know that if I hear weird noises, I say something instantly. So I don't know, but apparently there was some noise whistling going on. And I got that comment from a few people. So we'll leave it at that. Kill count. By the way, Nerd Sir put like about 500 So if you're a member or if you're watching the live stream, lots of good suggestions. Unfortunately, if you're not a member, you're not going to be able to see the chat that after the stream's over. But she put a lot of good suggestions there. So did Jade, and so did a few other people. Check them out if you can. You can scroll back, read the chat of different magic items that you can use in your game. But she says here, kill count increasing the blood sword power is a classic. Yeah. It's like you're kind of caught in that circle. I need it to kill, but the more I kill, the more powerful it gets. Like, oh,
basically 2 ways to make one a Bane weapon. Yeah, that's one of the things I have in my game. There's 2 particular enchantments on a weapon. There's a Bane and a Slaying. And basically, the Slaying is a much more powerful version. And there's basically 2 ways to make one: a Bane weapon that kills enough of its target will eventually become one, or if you're in a rush, you can ritually kill someone while you're making the item and start that way. But it also will have down effects, like anything that's targeted by it is going to be hostile to you, perhaps from a distance, perhaps being drawn towards you. Because this thing is reaching out. It wants to kill these things. So these are other downsides you can bring in.
Basically just made you that actually
power attracts the powerful.
I'm trying to remember the exact time when I heard it, saw that it was like there was something I saw it and it's like there's a weapon that had a downside where wielding it basically just made you an aggro magnet for things that you didn't know were there. Where wait, hunted. That was the name of it. It's like whatever was like it. I don't remember the setting specifically, but the weapon downside was called hunted, and it would give you a status effect where things would just find you somehow because you had it, and you'd end up having to fight more enemies than would otherwise be there.
Daryl says sometimes you can get interesting.
Also, an excellent side effect.
2 separate magically endowed items. You could actually have 2 curses that I don't want to say cancel each other out, but lessen each other's.
Daryl says sometimes you can get interesting synergistic effects between 2 separate magically endowed items. You could actually have 2 curses that I don't want to say cancel each other out, but lessen each other's effect, maybe like the closer they are, or as long as they're used for a particular purpose or something.
Finding something to offset it really.
What are your thoughts?
Hard. I mean, if we go back to that thing I mentioned about the constricting ring in Diablo 2, the life drain effect on it, while it would quickly kill you if you didn't have something to offset it, finding something to offset it really wasn't that hard. It's just something that most people wouldn't want to do because it required quite a lot of investment in things that give you passive life gain effects that most people wouldn't need otherwise.
Into the conflict.
Having an intelligent,
I am a very big fan of multiple intelligent items that despise each other. They're constantly drawing the party into the conflict.
Having an intelligent items act like cats in the back alley fighting over trash does sound like a hilarious way to play those.
You see that? Especially if they start if 2 magic swords in the party that just are out to get each other, and the owner, he's part of the sword, damn it. You get this guy. You see that? He pocketed that. You see that? That's the other thing about intelligent items should be characters. Even if they're very subtle ones, even if they don't speak, it should be a presence in the game. That's one of the things that bothers me in a lot of D&D games where I played in, where, it's an intelligence item. Yeah. And every now and then, like, oh, hey, Bob the Sword, is this, you detect precious metals, a really stupid power to put in the sword, but hey, it was on the table. It should be a presence. These things should matter.
Or especially, having a magic sword that talks to you about loot that's near you does actually sound hilarious. It just knows that there's gold near you.
Especially if it's very green.
Sounds
or especially if it has a magical sense that humans don't. So it tells you that you're close to gold, but it doesn't know where the gold is. It just knows that there's gold near you, and it turns out that like 20 feet below the paved street you're on, there's a deposit of gold. all the way down there that you need to do proper mining to get to. But the sword's like, hey, there's gold nearby. Hey, there's gold nearby.
Or if there's seems to be a person there. Also, I like with magic intelligent items, often instead of just having them speak or just be straight telepathic, I think it's very interesting if they have to communicate with you in weird ways, like in your dreams. Or if there's seems to be a person there that no one but you notices or hears, then maybe you're just crazy, like everyone seems to think you are.
It's something that I've seen in several works of fiction that a lot of GMs would decide they didn't want to do, but someone who actually likes this sort of thing could have a lot of fun with.
Not your echo.
Make the magic sword speak an iambic pentameter and make it vague hints rather than just telling you outright.
That it isn't. You're really strong. Not your echo gave a really cool. I think he might have just been joking, but cursive and accurate self-perception. That is a great idea. A magic item that makes you think it's giving you abilities that it isn't. You're really strong.
I think they exist in second edition because I know I've used something like that. I don't think I created it, so I'm pretty sure it was in one of the books. I think I'm pretty sure there's a magic item or 5 that happens to be like that. Yeah.
No, that is a very cool idea. I like that.
Hyperborea does actually have some things in it that are tricks. Like there's a healing potion that it makes you feel healthy. It doesn't actually change what your hit points are. And gets killed. We had a game where one of the players died because of that, because he drank the potion, thinks he's healthy and doesn't need to be healed, and then goes in and tries to fight something when he only actually has like 2 hit points and gets killed.
You don't suffer them. You don't feel pain or realize you're wounded when you're wielding the sword. But that's also dangerous because that could be another interesting thing. Like if you use wound penalties in a game. You don't suffer them. You don't feel pain or realize you're wounded when you're wielding the sword. But that's also dangerous because what do you? I thought I had you had 1 hit point. No, you felt fine.
Yeah, I mean, you could give them a curse similar to that. Was that condition where it's like you don't feel pain?
I've actually had discussions with that about people in real life where because they were injured and taking pain meds to make it so that the injury wasn't, making them constantly miserable.
Absolutely. And people get seriously hurt from that all the time, especially people with back problems and stuff.
Because the fact that they couldn't feel the pain, they were accidentally injuring themselves. Have a surgically reconstructed soldier
absolutely. That is a very real problem. Especially people with like chronic back problems and stuff that are always taking stuff for it.
The 2 examples I'm thinking of were a guy who had to have a surgically reconstructed soldier and a different person with a surgically reconstructed knee.
No, we're in segment 2.
Oh, okay then.
Let's just get to the rest of the comments here so we can get to the next segment. Unless it's tied didn't I just read that? Yes, I did.
Wait, we're still in segment 3, right?
No, we're in segment 2.
Oh, okay then.
There are a lot of people who Jade says cursed items are my least favorite unless it's tied to the world in a way that drives the players to action, whether to remove the curse or it's something that the big bad end guy is looking to attain. There's a lot of people who feel this way. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Just to be clear, I get where he's coming from, and I think I agree with him about 50%, but there's also that 50% of me that says, bad luck happens, and if adventuring was easy, everybody would do it. That's my fallback. But what do you guys think?
I definitely there's a place for both, I think, and also a lot of times even good items can punish you if they're aligned and you're not behaving. For instance, if I had a paladin with a holy avenger and he did something bad, that sword might get annoyed and start doing things to him until he started straightening it up and flew right. I mean, you can have conditional curses too.
That is actually an interesting point because a rather long-standing tradition exists of having a sword be or some other weapon or armor or whatever be consecrated to a specific deity, so that wielders of it who are worshippers of that deity can use all of its powers for free, no downsides whatsoever, because the deity likes them. People that the deity doesn't like, on the other hand, that's different. Then it's like it's a cursed item, except it's not really a curse. It's just that the deity thinks that you shouldn't be using this.
Or slowly work to
in the case of a big bad evil guy, having the deity that it's dedicated to be an evil god.
So Midrin says, by the large, I agree here with Mar Hockman. Players need to
or slowly work to convince you.
Room for the DM to cheat otherwise. And I actually want
over
Doc
time
to answer this first.
So Midrin says, by the large, I agree here with Mar Hockman. Players need to know what they are getting. There's too much room for the DM to cheat otherwise. And I actually want Doc to answer this first.
It's all a question of the GM does not cheat. He can be a bastard, but he does not cheat because he has created the world. The gods are his characters. I mean, I suppose you could, but
yeah, the specific comment.
It's all a question of how deadly and severe you want your game to be. The players always know what they're getting into. No, you don't always know what you're getting into until in life all the time. Maybe you don't.
Yeah, the specific comment he was
guess.
Referring to is the one where I mentioned that having players know what the downside is before deciding whether they want to try to use it. That's what he was commenting on.
Well, yeah, and maybe you don't, or don't know the extent of it. One way or the other with those things. Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the circumstances. I mean, I wouldn't do anything just completely sadistic to a player out of nowhere. The player will earns their fate one way or the other with those things. Is my attitude towards them.
Okay.
Yeah. Part of the reason why I like mimics is that mimics aren't instant kills. They are, however, something that punishes you for not paying attention, but they don't just kill you.
There you go. There's a perfect dichotomy right there. Mr. Max Boivin is a magic item.
And finally, Mr. Max Boivin says, I'm cursed with insanely good looks. It's canceled out by a terrible personality. There you go. There's a perfect dichotomy right there. Mr. Max Boivin is a magic item.
Well, Stacey, this specific curse has a name. It's called
Quebecois. Let's get into segment 3 here in a moment. Like I said, segment 3 will be about powerful artifacts that guide but do not overpower.
And send all of your hate. So for the people in Quebec, save all your hate for him. All right, let's get into segment 3 here in a moment. Like I said, segment 3 will be about powerful artifacts that guide but do not overpower. Want to remind folks, if we make $100 tonight, we will have a giveaway. If we don't, well, then
please refer to the description for the link to where you can make your hopefully tax.
The charity we support is the Wounded Warrior Project. I know a charity that needs a donation. It's the Wounded Warrior Project, national nonpartisan organization whose mission is to honor and empower wounded warriors. Please refer to the video's description for the link to where you can make your hopefully tax-deductible donation. And of course, if you enjoy this discussion, please like this video and subscribe to all of the panelists' channels, which you can also find in description. All right, we're starting this segment off with Mar Hockman talking about powerful artifacts. So when using powerful artifacts that influence the direction of the campaign, how do you satisfy players who welcome the guidance, those who resist what feels like a rigid path, and those who prefer a subtle influence that never overshadows their own choices?
See, when you said powerful artifacts, I actually prepared 2 examples that are things that are powerful in terms of directing the plot, but not necessarily powerful in terms of letting you win in combat. Like one example, which is something I brought up in one of the previous discussions, I don't remember when, was the idea of players are exploring a temple created by snake men. The snake men are very happy to put carefully worded signs so that it's easy to find anything you want in the temple quickly and easily just by looking at what's written on the walls. Catch is the snake men are writing this in something that can't be seen by humans.
Okay.
And the magical artifact in question is a mask that lets you actually see what the Snake Man wrote on the walls to tell you where to go. But it's one of those magical artifacts that has a very specific purpose, and only it's just one of those things where it's like it's something that's critical for story things and having the players actually pay attention to what they're doing. But it's one of those magical artifacts that has a very specific purpose, and only that specific purpose. And you can talk to the wizard. Oh, and for the mandatory Thundar the Barbarian example, one of the episodes of Thundar the Barbarian did actually have a communication device that was just a magic box. You open the magic box and you can talk to the wizard who made the magic box. That's all it did. But in terms of guiding people and telling people, you need to go here to do this, it's a tool for that in a story in terms of guiding the story, even if it doesn't do anything else.
Actions, whether heroic play or changing the world to some degree. Changing its role in the campaign's unfolding event.
Can you recall a moment when the players redefined an artifact's purpose, like through their actions, whether heroic play or changing the world to some degree, changing its role in the campaign's unfolding events?
We've had some Hyperborea games where people came up with some really, really weird ideas. In fairness, his idea with extremely creative ways of using those exploding pieces of paper that one of the players liked to use. Which, in fairness, his idea with them actually did result in them basically being used like landmines. You just like put them anywhere that someone who can read would be like, "Hey, what's that?" Boom. To be used for. Which, that was kind of ridiculous, but in a way that technically is allowed by the rules, even if it's not probably what the rules are actually meant to be used for.
Something that will fix that. Nothing else. I'm kind of on the same page as that. For me, like a powerful artifact would be like there's like this, there's this huge blight that's been plaguing the kingdom for 20 years and hardly anything will grow. And there's something that will fix that. Nothing else will. That's very powerful. I don't like the, plus 20 sword of F you, you're dead. It's just, it's game breaking. There's no real reason for it unless it's something that you're going to come across or that will only be useful against a certain foe. Something like that would be acceptable, but I don't like just like crazy, powerful, over the top things. I don't think that really specific.
That one thing that you mentioned, I have actually seen that come up in some games. It's like some games will have things where the sword is like +5, but only if you're fighting a demon.
Yeah, things like that. Something that's very powerful under a specific circumstance is better than just something that's like ridiculously overpowered, and you might as well be like 10 levels higher than you actually are for having it. That doesn't do it for me. I don't see any real value in that. Plus, then you get into the whole thing like, well, why does he have that kind of crap? And then no one needs that headache.
So I had a rune weapon in a Palladium fantasy game, and they did that. They're like, why does he have that? And then they started seeing what it was doing to my character, like, glad he has that, except we want to now get it away from him.
Good impact on
My precious, no, I didn't copy Golem on that, but it's one of those things where it's like, he's got something really cool, but is it really cool? And I actually think that can have a really good impact on play. What if you have that thief that's just like, I'm getting that thing. I don't care. I'm getting it. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, yes, my precious. And now you got to get it from him. And the paladin's like, oh, I can do this. I'll take it from him and I will destroy it in the church, or we will use it for good. And then he gets it. And all of a sudden he's like, my precious.
That is a pretty good curse, to be honest.
What?
Having it make anyone who has it want to keep it for their own personal use and go kind of nuts just because they have it.
So what it specifically did for me in the Palladium game was it started shifting my alignment slowly. In my head, I'm like, no, so I was a wolf, and I'm like 8 feet tall. I'm big, I was a pretty tough guy. So I'm like, none of you guys can control this. Only I can control this. As it's slowly leading me down the path of like, I could murder my friends.
When using powerful artifacts, when using powerful artifacts that influence the direction of the campaign, how do you satisfy players who welcome the guidance?
By the way, I think it was it who said it before? Daryl said, I already forgot the question. Well, here's the question for you, sir. When using powerful artifacts, when using powerful artifacts that influence the direction of the campaign, how do you satisfy players who welcome the guidance, like they follow the sword, it's leading you wherever you want to go, those who resist because now they're railroaded, screw that, and those who prefer, hey, the subtle influence that doesn't overshadow their own choices?
I think that's mainly just a question of technique and knowing the party. That's you've gone too far then, and it's a question give them information that they need. Not too much. Don't never let the item run the game. That's you've gone too far then. And it's a question of feeling out the players. I mean, there's been groups where I've kind of like had to have the item and again give them a little more guidance that I would have with another, just because they were being dense. But that's all just a question of knowing the party that you're dealing with and exactly how much they need. And again, also this can be conditional. It can be in certain situations. But it's all a question of the items should be a tool and never the situation they're in. Never a party leader. They could potentially be a party member, again with an intelligent item.
There's been a lot of commentary
but
right now
it's all a question of balance and knowing the group and what they're trying to do and the situation they're in.
Can you give an example for folks how an item can be used subtly to nudge them in a direction? I mean, there's been a lot of commentary right now about losing player agency over this stuff, and I'm just gonna be upfront with folks. Yes, if you have an intelligent item, you lose player agency, or you can lose player agency. Don't like it? Don't play in a world with intelligence items. With that said, there are subtle ways that game masters can nudge you, but not force you. There are ways like
at the same
go ahead.
time. Well, for example, one of the games Bear ran, we had these cursed coins that we were constantly trying to get rid of, and something would always go wrong. They were allowed them basically to listen and keep track of us, but at the same time, it would kind of literally pull in the direction necessary for us of the character that was manipulating us. So it was really useful at times too. But it wasn't an overpowering thing. It wasn't anything we were going to was going to help us. In fact, in many ways, it hindered us. But it was necessary for us to find this guy. Stuff like that is very useful.
Reminds me of the thing from the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie with those cursed coins, because apparently the cursed coins did actually want you to take the coin back to the place where the treasure was actually became cursed.
Yeah, and again,
but
was trying to get back to its owner.
It wasn't a major plot point. It was just something that they threw in there for background fluff. Is that literally everyone who was cursed by this could feel that as part of the curse.
So that's another. Yeah, and again, the back to the Tolkien, the ring was trying to get back to its owner. Longer guiding them. It would manipulate as it needed to and could to try to get it would have its own agenda. So that's another thing about an item helping the players along or guiding them. It might not necessarily have your best interests at heart.
Yeah, because if I remember, the ring is actually like a piece of Sauron's soul or something.
Yeah, he's partially in the ring, and it's trying to get back to it. So that's another great way to deal with one of these powerful artifacts that's kind of driving the player along. It might not be entirely on your side, or might just consider you disposable even if it is on your side. At least not permanently.
Oh yeah, because like going back to the Sauron thing, that ring was kind of in some ways like a phylactery, because he couldn't die unless the ring was destroyed.
Yeah, it's same idea.
I can't remember. Did I ask you a follow?
At least not permanently. He could be like physically destroyed, but he would always eventually come back as long as the ring was around.
So let's move on over to the crafting gamer. Hope he's still awake there.
Yeah.
All right. I can't remember. Did I ask you a follow? Yeah, I did ask you a follow.
Players who welcome the guidance, those who resist what feels.
And you actually answered 3 of the other ones anyway. So let's move on over to the crafting gamer. Hope he's still awake there.
Yeah.
When using powerful artifacts that influence the direction of the campaign, how do you satisfy players who welcome the guidance, those who resist what feels like a rigid path, and those who prefer subtle influence that never overshadows their choices?
Say, oh, by the way, there's something
Carrot, meat, stick.
I have actually had more players turn around the
And that means
I'm sorry, but most of the time it's really that simple. If you want to guide the players, even if it's false, you want to say, oh, by the way, there's something valuable at the end of this. I have actually had more players turn around the opposite way when I said, oh, you got to save the world versus, oh, you get something for saving the world.
Cursed item section.
But even if you give them something, you like I said, carrot, meat, stick. You got to hit them hard with something else.
Can you give an
Otherwise,
example?
even then, well, back to actually the story from the cursed item section. There is the beginning of that story, that adventure is the players are supposed to either hear of or find a rune weapon that wants to be taken back to a particular cave so it can have a new master.
Take me to this place, I can become your rune weapon. What the item doesn't tell you, and
one of the ways you're supposed to get the players to follow the item, follow the story, is it is capable of communicating with them directly and saying, hey, if you take me to this place, I can become your rune weapon. What the item doesn't tell you, and this is where
weapon to the cave.
A little more player agency comes in, is the item actually tries to convince you not to go any deeper into the cave because there's other rune weapons back there. And it's afraid of being replaced. But up to that point, they are following the rune weapon to the cave.
So give an example of how you can do that.
So it's
without having somebody like a few
it's
people said
it's
in
always
chat saying,
it always has
to.
to. I will definitely 100% heathen dog on this one. You have to trick the players into thinking it's their idea.
Trick them into thinking, like you just said there.
So give an example of how you can do that without having somebody like a few people have said in chat about saying taking away their agency. Because even Heathen Dog will say that he doesn't believe in player agency, but you've got to trick them into thinking, like you just said there, that it was their idea. So what's an example of how you could trick them or how you have tricked them?
I wanted to add another element to the game,
let's see
but
here.
I needed an excuse. Instead of him just
player.
He was very much you tell me to
from
go
a while
this
back.
way,
He
will go the opposite direction type mentality.
He was playing a character that cared very much about his cultural heritage. I wanted to add another element to the game, but I needed an excuse. Instead of him just he was very much the you tell me to go this way, I will go the opposite direction type mentality. So what I put in front of him to get him to where I wanted to was to say, hey, there is someone attacking the Cultural Heritage Museum.
Sucking him through a portal saying rips
and then I sucked his ass through a portal and he got stuck in Atlantis.
Or I tricked him.
But I either could have, as a GM, either completely fucked his world over by sucking him through a portal saying Riffs calls you, like Ravenloft.
The whole time I don't know.
Or
I
tricked him into going to the Museum of History, where to get him to go to Atlantis, he had to chase down the guy attacking the museum.
Forcing the characters to
the whole time I
mean,
don't normally do this, but I was leading him straight to Atlantis when he thought it was his idea to chase down the guy who was attacking the museum.
Kind of will fluctuate between. Yeah, I'm very much against forcing the characters to follow a particular path. I mean, I like to do minimal planning there. What I like to do is just kind of like I kind of will fluctuate between something that's semi-plotted and sandboxing. Once I see they get their teeth into something, then okay, now I know where to lead this. Although, of course, there could be forces that are manipulating them, or on occasion even forcing them to do things. But you have to be very careful about that. The players should ultimately be in the driver's seat. They should be in charge of what they do. There could be consequences to ignoring things, but.
And then it's like, okay.
I don't normally do that. I think I actually had a couple stories about where I tried it, because otherwise I'd had to answer that. Oh, well, I don't do that. Because most of the time, what I do is I'll literally just roll up like in a random encounter table, and then it's like, okay,
From there, everything
go.
will organically happen.
I literally plan nothing. I literally know nothing. All I know is I'm somewhere in one of the playing settings, and it's like
the players had either pissed somebody off or started going in their own direction.
everyone said, no, most people don't believe me when I say you just go. From there, everything will organically happen. I have absolutely no idea. I have no plans. Sometimes I don't even know what the campaign is going to be until after the players had either pissed somebody off or started going in their own direction.
Yeah, random hex crawls doing random stuff for random reasons. Yeah, that's by the definition, there's no direction. Players are literally just wandering around. The absolute worst experience I ever had in a TTRPG was a guy who actually was running a module that he'd only like halfway read before he decided to run it, and didn't realize that the module was basically a canned story. It's a rather large canned story that you can go through multiple different ways, but it's not a hex crawl adventure. And he was trying to present it as a hex crawl adventure, and we were confused and had no idea what we were supposed to be doing because he kind of didn't bother with the whole breadcrumbs thing and just like, oh, just go explore the city or something.
Powers never trivialize challenges. So maintaining a balance between how it's helping the party out with like its power.
There's a follow-up I want to ask Crafting Gamer here.
Still have its
so
agency,
how do you make certain that an artifact's powers never trivialize challenges? So maintaining a balance between how it's helping the party out with like its power and letting the party still have its agency, so to speak, and its ingenuity.
I think I would go about it by
that
very similar to I did with the rune.
I'm honestly not entirely sure that
story I was talking about, where
I think I would go about it
the rune
by
at first wasn't usable to them, and it wasn't until they got there that they discovered.
Well, actually, very similar to I did with the
what else there was.
rune weapon from the previous story I was talking about, where
I'm answering this correctly. So it was
the rune at first wasn't usable to them, and it wasn't until they got there that they discovered.
And I just had a
what else there was.
I forgot the question.
And so,
so how do you make certain that
correctly?
artifact
So it was
never trivialize
not guaranteed they'd find anything
so there's a
special
between it helping through its power,
and I just had a complete brain fart. I think I forgot the question.
Okay, right. I don't know why.
So how do you make certain that artifact powers never trivialize the challenges for the players? So there's a balance between it helping through its power and the players still using their own ingenuity.
Okay, right. I don't know where I was going off with that question. No, that's actually a very much simpler answer than I was going with. That is, you don't always put for rune weapons. You don't always put the combat option in front of them. Like it's not common. Certain rune weapons have not just combat abilities, but also certain spells.
So you want to, if you're going to,
you want to put them in situations where they can utilize those spells, but you don't want to make it so those spells just insta win either. Like it's not common, but some rune weapons have healing spells. So you want to, if you're gonna
balance is
keep that from being overpowering, you either have to minimize combat so it's almost useless, or you have to use combat where that is only a minor help.
1-2 hits.
But getting that balance is pretty easy as long as you know how to challenge a player. Now, I'm not saying balance as in, it's got to be perfect. No, I mean balance as in 1-2 hits. Did I even scratch this thing? No. Okay, bye.
So it's not overpowering, but also not useless.
So all of that is great theory.
He's got to know how to.
And I'm glad that you're putting that into folks' brains.
Balance the situation to the weapon they have or the item they have, so it's not overpowering, but also not useless.
Numbers or
so all of that is great theory, and I'm glad that you're putting that into folks' brains. But I think it's also important to actually share an actual example. I mean, in terms of numbers or something that's happened at your table or an experience that you've actually been part of, or whether you're player or game master, it doesn't matter, for folks out there to kind of just hear it in action. So how would you handle that? Even if you have to think of it off the top of your head, how would you handle something like that? How would you put that into action?
I don't normally do this, but I would either make a combat so challenging that the players have to start using up those spells, within the weapon. We'll stick with the healing thing. Otherwise, they're going to lose. I would either make a combat that is situation where I don't normally do this, but I would either make a combat so challenging that the players have to start using up those spells use them and within the weapon, but they're not going to. Otherwise, they're going to lose. Or I would put them in a situation where I healed this person. And now the spells are dead when part of the whole thing only generally useful. Yeah, you can use them and they will be usable, but they're not going to healing spell can only do so instantly break the situation where, oh yeah, and in combat I healed this person and now he's not almost dead when part of the whole thing was you have to go find this root that's going to help him. You gotta, but you also the healing spell can only do so much type thing. And in combat, you gotta, like I said, you either gotta be super challenging, so the healing spell is actually useful without just up, down, up, down, up, down,
and not just hit point loss. Where,
but you also have to make sure you don't
to get back injuries. That's a little different.
Make it so the players always feel like they're gonna lose.
Well, there's also the idea of like having injuries and not just hit point loss. Where hit point loss is easy to get back. Injuries, that's a little different.
Like this and like this, and it keeps sidetracking you.
So what about an intelligent item that talks to you, and you think it's leading you in the right direction, and it seems to be leading you in the right direction, or maybe it actually is, but it's not going like this. It's going like this and like this, and it keeps sidetracking you. Oh, it wants to have a new experience over here. Oh, it needs the blood of something else over there. Whatever it happens to be, but it's not keeping them on the straight and narrow, so to speak. And every time they get sidetracked, it brings the enemy or the big boss or whatever you want to call it at the end, because I'm seeing a lot of that in chat, closer and closer and closer to winning. So like for me, I use timelines. That's just a generic term, but I have a lot of things going on in the world at one time. As they're going down one timeline, other things are happening, and maybe it's sidetracking them into this timeline, that timeline, that timeline, that timeline, as the main timeline is all of a sudden getting close, like, oh crap, we got to get back over there.
Taking the characters somewhat off track, and they've got to use their own ingenuity and their own agency to bring it back on track.
Okay.
I don't really use timelines, so I don't really have a good example.
Well, no, it's not about timelines. It's about the item taking the characters somewhat off track, and they've got to use their own ingenuity and their own agency to bring it back on track.
This goes back to that thing you were saying earlier about doing research. Understanding a sentient weapon's motivations is key to understanding what it's saying to you. Thus, knowing what it actually wants will let you understand why it's guiding you to this, that, and the other thing, when it's seemingly not actually pointing you at the real goal.
Just having the characters having dreams about certain things. And also it depends. There's a difference between a quest marker, like there's a big arrow off in the distance, like okay, we're going that way, or just having the characters having dreams about certain things that might lead them in a certain direction, or they might just have an urge to go to a certain place, or they know they have to talk to someone that they might not know where they are. It's all a question of how explicit you want to be. Keep it as subtle and interesting as possible, and allow them, I think it should, room to interpret things, as opposed to just, okay, you have to go here. You're dead. Unless it only works on, the Lich Lord.
Okay, anything left on the table when it comes to powerful artifacts that guide but do not overpower?
Well, I think the powerful artifact should never be the +20 Morphle Sword of F you're dead. Unless it only works on, the Lich Lord Bob.
Or how about it doesn't matter how many things you kill, that isn't going to be what the end goal is?
Yeah, I would very often, a big powerful item is basically useless until the finale, when the deed has been done, then it can be used. And that's kind of your reward, that you get to do this thing that wraps everything up. It shouldn't be just this thing that's allowing you to just scythe through armies like wheat, because that just gets boring.
I will again. You paid to be on the show. So thank you very much.
Well, let's hit some of the chat then.
Super chat.
And I don't know who this guy is, but some weirdo said, "I'll drink to that." Thank you, Doc Flamingo. He paid.
I will again.
He paid to be on the show. So thank you very much for the $10 super chat. RPG Gen Exile says, "Oh great, now the GM." Oh, I did start this one, and the artifact are taking my character's agency. At the time he typed this, I was talking about my Wolfen character. I actually want to be clear about something. The only thing that the game master told me was that I was slowly taking alignment hits, and I think I went down 2 total. But he kept saying, so I role played that out. That wasn't actually something he said, like, "Oh no, you want to own this." That was just something that I looked into. It started out being altruistic, like, let me hold on to this because I can do this, and then it became, let me hold on to this because I don't trust them. So I kept my agency, at least in that game.
There's a rune weapon that.
What are your thoughts about intelligent items taking away your agency, though?
It's literally a soul drinker. I actually like it. There's a rune. I never got to implement it because I discovered it long after I took my big break. There's a rune weapon that forces you to kill people. It's literally a soul drinker, a good aligned soul drinker weapon, I might add. So it can only be wielded by a good person. But you have to kill people. It gives you that urge. And the sword throughout the entire thing will try to console the person that is wielding it, because they are of a good alignment, but they have to kill people. And sometimes the urge is so strong they have to kill innocent people. Fun twists I've always wanted to put into a campaign. It's like, are you going to?
So what would that do to a campaign, especially if they're supposed to be playing good characters?
The rune weapon is technically making you do it, so I'm not going to immediately change your alignment. But if you start going out and going, that's one of those fun twists I've always wanted to put into a campaign. It's like, your alignment's going to change. Are you going to hang on to that weapon and potentially change your alignment? Because the rune weapon is technically making you do it, so I'm not going to immediately change your alignment. But if you start going out and going, okay, I'm just going to satisfy all kills by just killing anybody, your alignment's going to change and you're going to lose the weapon. And if your alignment changes, well, depending on how badly, I might be, okay, I need a bad guy NPC. Now that's you.
And would enjoy doing that. I would say if I wanted to play around with an item that was going to like have compulsive effects on people, I would be very careful and pick a player that would get into that and would roleplay that and would enjoy doing that. I wouldn't try to force that on a random player, because then you're just locking horns there. It's like, oh, you're making me do stuff. So I would pick my battles there very, very carefully. And also, it could happen. You wake up in a strange place covered in blood, and what the hell happened? And oh, by the way, somebody killed 20 orphans last night.
There's a lot of players where if they think an item has a curse that will let it take control of you, will introduce it to the bottom of the nearest lake.
Or even what the rune weapons are until they tell you.
It's like, oh, this is something I don't want. Bye.
Yeah, but a lot of curse items you can't get rid of.
Yeah, well, in the case of rune weapons, most of the time you don't want to. And technically, you're not supposed to know what the curse is or even what the rune weapons are until they tell you, because they are thinking weapons. And with more than one weapon, it says it's not going to tell you the curse. You're going to have to find out the hard way.
Go ahead.
Goblin.
Sorry, I can't help it. Best line of the night. Those nasty, dirty elves, they killed Fred.
This being a
love it. Oh, I actually go ahead.
Goblin mentioned something that is actually a fun thing you can do with sentient weapons, though. This being the sentient weapon, because of whatever reason, has a different grasp of reality than you do. So his example is something that is old. It remembers the environment that you're in as it was a century ago. It will tell you to go to places that burned down over a decade ago and stuff like that, because it hasn't seen this area in over 100 years. It's remembering things. It knew what the area was like quite well 100 years ago, for example. physical world being like different. I also remember that are kind of like, that's right, the Night Watch and Day Watch movies. They had the concept of things. They went with the idea of like the fairy realm and the physical world being like different layers of reality that are kind of like interwoven on each other. Well, they had the concept of things that could see what's in the Fey realm and thus point at things that don't exist in the physical realm.
Those were Russian movies, right?
Yes.
Am I thinking of the right thing? Okay.
Well, yeah, it's like those had a very interesting concept of what to do with the Fey realm, because again, Ruskies that can do very interesting things with the story.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's like it's just one of those things. It's like if the magical items way of seeing the world is different from yours, that can do very interesting things with the story.
So we might be talking something more like King Arthur type stuff, or even like Game
All right, got an interesting one. I'd like you guys to address just quickly. What about magic items in a non-traditional medieval fantasy setting? So we might be talking something more like King Arthur type stuff, or even like Game of Thrones type stuff, in terms of where it's low magic, but magic exists in some degree.
To be honest, though, it's like the reason why I chose the magic box. I mean, is that the guy I already used an example from Thundar the Barbarian. There's dozens more from that show, but you know, Artemis. But to be honest, though, it's like the reason why I chose the magic box from Thundar is that the guy basically used it like it's a cell phone. I mean, it didn't work like a cell phone. The only person you can talk to is Artemis, but if you wanted to talk to Artemis, all you had to do was open the box. Definitely not the sort of thing you would have in a traditional medieval fantasy setting.
All right, let's step it up.
But
to what
it's
about
a magic
more
box,
modern, like
all
a
the same.
Cthulhu game?
Yeah, not your Echo. What was mentioning? Like, hey, what
Anybody
about
else?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Which there's a lot of magic.
All right, let's step it up to what about a more modern, like a Cthulhu game?
One of the seasons be. Yeah, not your Echo. What was mentioning? Like, hey, what about Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Which again, there's a lot of magic in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Actually, kind of they actually have one of the main cast in one of the seasons be a sleeping elder god. That got weird, but hey, you know what? Again, it's a modern fantasy setting that's actually kind of a high magic setting when you consider just how much magical stuff happens. Believe it or not, Star Trek actually does have magic.
And how would you handle something like the equivalent of magic items in, say, a science fiction setting?
That people think of as science fiction, right? However, they often go with. Believe it or not, Star Trek actually does have magic items in it. It's weird and strange, and even figure out how it works. It's a setting that people think of as science fiction, right? However, they often go with things. It's like, we don't actually know what this is. All we know is that it does something. We don't actually understand why, and we can't figure out how it works because everything we know about it says it violates the laws of physics. That was usually the creation of that has come up long gone usually with super beings, but not always. The people who made it aren't around, and it's one of those things where it's handled as a thing of like, this is something that was usually the creation of an ancient long gone race or something like that, where the people who made it aren't around. You can't ask them what it does or how it does it. So you end up with something that's functionally magical because no one in the story actually understands it. And in some cases, they think it is physically impossible, except that it's actually there. But again, it's one of those things that's like ancient relics that do weird things is the general vibe.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So anybody else?
The person out there that you're talking to may not have played
Palladium. I play a lot of Palladium, which has magic in almost every setting. The magic items is so pervasive. What? Yeah. So setting you're playing in, even
The person out there that you're talking to may not have played Palladium, though.
True. Well, in Palladium, magic items is pervasive no matter what setting you're playing in, even beyond the supernatural. It's just that in most cases, those magical items you aren't going to want because they aren't going to be nearly as useful as your own power because magic is so low. It's basically, it would be the equivalent of us being able to cast a single magic missile compared to literally having a ghost shotgun.
Warehouse 13. Yeah, but let's look at rifts.
I mean, there are some items in the game where you can play around a whole campaign of how this cursed item is fucking up an area.
It takes fantasy,
but that would also be straight up. You went from beyond the supernatural to Warehouse 13.
Yeah, but let's look at rifts. I mean, because since we're talking about future sci-fi, also, I mean, rifts is loaded with magic. It's got magic all over the place. It takes fantasy magic and just applies it to that setting. Are there rune weapons in rifts? Well, I know Heathen Dog just covered them recently in one of the rifters, so you absolutely can use rune weapons in rifts. Is it going to compare to a glitter boy? No, but man, is that glitter boy going to have a surprise when actually he takes damage from a sword.
Misremembering, but I thought it had some handheld weapons that could do.
And then you can add in things like you could give a glitter boy a sword. So anyway, if I remember correctly, Robotech even had some. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought it had some handheld weapons that could do mega damage that were effectively magical. So anyway, the point I'm getting at here is the magic can be brought in. Just because technology is higher doesn't mean that magic isn't there, and you can still make it useful. You can still make it artifact power. It just might not seem as it might not seem as powerful in comparison, which actually is a great balancing factor. If you've got juicers and crazies, and if folks out there don't understand the game, what we're talking about, juicers are absolutely combat monsters. They even make combat cyborgs look like wimps. Crazies are a combat monster with some psychic powers. If you give something like that a rune weapon or an artifact of some sort, you're probably not going to overpower the game the same way you would in a fantasy game because you got things with big guns that can shoot back. However, if it offers protections people weren't expecting, if it talks to you and leads you in a direction that players weren't expecting, if for whatever reason it has a hankering for that blade of armor and maybe does extra damage against it, you could have, if not a game changer, definitely an upgrade.
Outdoors. Also, it's powerful is kind of a relative term. One of the most powerful items I ever gave a party was it was basically a piece of parchment. And outdoors, it was a map. You fold it up every time you opened it up. It was 100 yards in every direction, but everything was there. Like, look, there's a horse behind this barn. And if you did it indoors, it showed you the room you were in. That was immensely useful to them in all manner of situations. That was like their prized possession, but it wasn't this huge, overpowering, nuclear bomb item.
In a game that he ran,
so it's the utility of something is more important than the power of it.
Absolutely. All right, we got 3 more, and then we've got to move on to the next segment.
Then using it.
Jade says, in a game that he ran, I have an artifact that projects a sphere of divine power harming evil foes, but I have to sacrifice vitality to use it. Knowing when to use it is more important than using it. I think that magic items that have that risk reward or have that implication that, like, if you use it at the right time, it's powerful. If you don't use it at the right time, it can be more of a hindrance or at worst or best a wash. I like that concept. What do you guys think?
Well, it's
I like it.
This is the reason why I brought up the Ring of Constriction.
Like I said, as a GM, I failed to implement it properly more than once, but it is a concept I like from the beginning.
Reward with that, but players are another thing to remember about risk-reward mechanics is, in order to this is the reason why I brought up the Ring of Constricting earlier. Is that yes, there's a risk reward with that, but players are incentivized to break the risk reward mechanic in order to trivialize the upside. So, yes, it exists, but is it necessarily going to work the way you want it to? Well, as the old saying goes, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
It should let them punch a little above their weight class. Take that otherwise unbeatable foe.
Right, let's get. I think I have a couple of super chats that popped in. Grizzly Beardo says, ideally, the magic item should open up more possibilities for the player. It should let them punch a little above their weight class, take that otherwise unbeatable foe, but not be an easy button. I sometimes think that. What do you think about the idea of giving them some hubris? Like they think that they have the easy button, and then they get smacked around a little bit.
Very interesting situation. That's always a possibility,
Indeed,
and a fun
have you ever
one.
used an item that's like, no, I'm not going to attack that.
Definitely inflating their egos a little bit, making them think they're badder than they actually are,
Go
can
ahead.
create some very interesting situations.
In D&D, have you ever used an item that's like, no, I'm not going to attack that?
This sounds incredibly overpowered until you realize it's actually an exploitable weakness
Go ahead.
that you now have. I've seen it in games where certain things that will get thrown in, like, oh, this sounds incredibly overpowered, until you realize that it's actually an exploitable weakness that you now have in your party, and you're like, wait, that counts as a weakness? Oh, that's why. There's also things as like having something that does. I mentioned rust monsters earlier. It's like, it's like you have a really, really powerful metal sword. Oh, yeah, about that. But like, there's also things as like having something that does a massive amount of fire damage might not be a good idea when you're inside a, say, wooden mansion. You don't want to, light the building on fire. That sort of thing. Also is a possible story inconvenience.
Sorry,
As a pyromaniac, I am grievously offended by your not wanting to set the building on fire. Fire is pretty. Fire is our friend.
Oh, whatever. Discord blocks too many things.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second here. A lot of things going on in the background.
Retro for $10. By the way, I haven't seen you around, Albert, recently. Thank you very much for the
Oh,
super
whatever.
Chat. Appreciate it. Glad that you were here today. Maybe
Discord
off topic,
blocks
but
too many
as an
things.
In-house origin for After the Bomb. What if the Hindu god? Yep, not saying that.
Albert, Nada, Retro for $10. By the way, I haven't seen you around, Albert, recently. Thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate it. Glad that you were here today. Maybe off topic, but as an in-house origin for After the Bomb, what if the Hindu god, yep, not saying that, altered the animals as a result of abuse and excessive trophy huntings by people? Your thoughts, please. Anything is better than the backstory for After the Bomb. So I love After the Bomb. The backstory for it is ridiculously stupid. So I think that could be kind of cool, and actually might even make you want to put the animals on a more aggressive stance. Instead of, I'm not saying that they're passive, but generally speaking, it's the humans that are against the animals, and the animals are kind of doing their thing, and just pushing back against humans. In this case, you could actually have the animals like, screw you guys, Gaia returns, baby.
So to make it even more chaotic, you could have it so that it's not a single deity behind this, and that the reason why it's so chaotic is that the deities that are behind this are all doing their own thing and not really working together. So their creations are doing turf wars. Oh yeah, by the way, the humans, you're in the way. Yeah, like humans being a proxy battle between
the Iliad is full of fun stuff like that, where the gods are having their own piss fight behind the scenes and kind of just using and involving everyone. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with that.
Yeah, like humans being a proxy battle between deities. Old story trope.
Right? Who has more insanities, the crazy or the sword?
And then finally, Law Dog for $9.99. Thank you very much, sir, for the $9.99. I'm now imagining a crazy with a rune weapon. That's as insane as its wielder, right? Who has more insanities, the crazy or the sword?
And that could be another good tip-off for dangerous items like this. What condition is the person who currently has it in? And maybe there's a reason for that.
I want to thank everybody. Sorry, not every chat can go up. We're not getting a lot of super chats tonight. Thank you very much to people who have super chatted. All right,
so
putting a few more.
Let's head on into the final segment of the night here in just a moment. Before that, I want to thank everybody. Sorry, not every chat can go up. We're not getting a lot of super chats tonight. Thank you very much to people who have super chatted. So I am putting a few more normal chats up there than normal, but I can't put everything up there. A lot of good ideas, a lot of good suggestions going on in the chat. If you are a member, if you're watching it live, obviously you're reading them. If you're a member, you can go back and watch the chat live. So I hope you can. Hold on, I'm going to make sure right now because something tells me, oh my God. Yeah. I forgot to turn on subscriber only mode. I forgot to save. Hold on. I didn't update this the way I was supposed to, and it's important because I want to save the chat for you guys later. I can everything else I can deal with later. There we go. Now it's subscriber only. Look at that. I could add weirdos talking.
Once the stream ends,
but with that said, just as a reminder, Game Master Insight airs live on Fridays at 6 p.m. Central Time, except for the last Friday of the month. That's right. Next week, He's and Dog and I will be doing the members only live stream. Once the stream ends, the complete live stream stays exclusive for YouTube members, but the 4 panel discussions become available to everyone a month after we air. If you enjoy this discussion, please like this video and subscribe to all of the panelists' channels, which you can find in the description. All right, let's jump into our last segment of the night.
Oh, does this mean we can curse like a longshoreman with Tourette syndrome now?
No. That segment after the stream ends. That stream. But after I play the credits that roll, yes. But thank you for asking. And I appreciate you guys not cussing like sailors on the show. All right, so
we're going to go in backward order this time.
We are going to talk about potential conflicts with these type of weapons. But before we do that, let's have our panelists reintroduce themselves, share content they create, and tell you where you can find them online. We're going to go in backward order this time. We're going to start with Mar Hockman. Remember to thank them in the comments and let them know which of their ideas resonated with you the most. All right, Mar Hockman.
I'm Mark Hockman. Okay, so if I remember right from what I copy pasted, your question here was introducing non-traditional magic items.
But why are you reading the question? Tell us who you are. We'll get to the question.
Fine. I'm Mark Hockman. I often do things on YouTube and Twitch. I sent Max a link to my YouTube channel. I forgot to send him a link to my Twitch channel, but it's spelled the same as my card here. It's just Mark Hockman.
It's in the description. Everybody's is in the description. Right now, you will find all right, anyway, crafting gamer.
Hi everyone, I'm the Crafting Gamer. I'm currently not making videos. I'm working on making some crafting videos and got to get back to the Robotech. But if you go to my channel right now, you will find a long list of Robotech videos. And
you're muted.
Doc Flamingo the muted.
Okay. We'll leave it on and.
Doc Flamingo here on
and Doc. And then after you're done, Doc, I will ask you the question because we're starting back with you again here.
My game Ashes and Empire has been out for
you're muted.
The new game, Age of Blood. Doc Flamingo the muted. Here, Doc Flamingo here on YouTube. AJ Stoner on Drive-Thru. My game Ashes and Empire has been out for a long time. The new game, Age of Blood and Iron, is coming out end of May. With one of my players, and I'll be I've got a couple live plays of that on the YouTube channel, and in the upcoming weeks before the game comes out, I'm going to start doing some short videos going over the system so you can see how they actually work. I probably do with one of my players, have them come in and we'll go through some various things and like piece by piece so you can see how it actually like breaks down and works as opposed to just seeing the rules like you do in the game itself.
Whatever that means to you.
Okay. And then we'll hit you with the question first since we're back to the beginning of the panel. When introducing non-traditional magic items such as living or sentient weapons, objects that serve unconventional roles, whatever that means to you, how do you handle those who embrace these creative concepts, those who find them too unusual or distracting, and those who want them to fit naturally into an established setting?
Part of that is just feeling out the group. It's usually a big deal when that happens. I don't like to do that very casually, or they might find something casually and eventually find out that's going on, but a big part of that is just feeling out the group before it happens. It's going to derail the game or not, and knowing what page everybody is on. So, like if you're going to do something like a really crazy weird thing before you start doing, know who you're playing with before you actually do that, if it's going to derail the game or not. So it's just a question of knowing your players and establishing what you're dealing with in the campaign world before you start doing anything really weird.
Here we go. Have you ever used, I know you've used, or you've said you've used intelligent items. Have you ever used living items?
I already asked you some of these. These are kind of redundant based on how you guys answer questions here.
What would be the
Oh, here we go. Have you ever used, I know you've used, or you've said you've used intelligent items. Have you ever used living items, or would you consider them the same thing?
Then we'll just go.
Well, what would be the distinction?
Can you describe
I don't necessarily think there has to be. I just want to make sure there is or isn't one with you before I finish the entire follow-up question.
I mean, I would basically consider them the same thing.
Then we'll just go on because I think this is a good question for you. Can you describe a time when interacting with a living or intelligent item required diplomatic skill or negotiation, adding layers beyond just simple mechanical benefits?
Probably very all the time. These things have their own motivations. They have what they want to do. They have their opinions of what you're doing, and generally will not be, especially since they're probably, if it's like a magic weapon, it's probably very focused on its purpose. It's going to want to be used. It's going to want to be used in the way it feels it should be used, and it's going to let you know that. And they're, you could have the player who's like, I don't want to get into stupid, pointless fights where I'm going to get hurt and all my henchmen are going to die and the survivors will leave me. It's like, no, we must battle because that is what I do. I am a sword, damn you. This can create all kinds of fun situations, especially if it's a sword that has the ability to give you away when you're trying to hide. Because damn it wants to get into a fight. Yeah, make it a character. If you're going to have an item like that, they should be very rare. If you're going to have an item like that, you've got to lean into it. Don't let it just be this stupid thing that every 4 or 5 game sessions you'll think to have it do something. Make it a character. Make it an important NPC.
I like those words right there. Make it a character.
But if you make it
something that, as somebody was talking before about losing player agency and so forth. Don't have to lose player agency necessarily. Yes, Dungeons and Dragons and even some other games do have roles in there to say versus, the contest of wills. But if you make it a character,
says, oh, you must succumb to its will.
Maybe it's something you want. Okay, might not want to, but you need to appease. And you do that through role playing. I think that's 100 times better than just a die roll that says, "Oh, you must succumb to its will."
Go get a drink or something. And even if you are going to do that, situations where it's going to overpower you, lean into that, play that out. If they're not in control, have them arguing with, as opposed to just say, "Okay, you lost the roll. Sword's in control now, so you go get a drink or something. I'll let you know if you're dead." Play that conflict out. Have the character, even if they're not in control, have them arguing with the sword, trying to take control back. Maybe they can reason with it. Maybe they can't. Keep the player involved, even if they're not technically in control at the time.
He's got a little cardboard scratching.
That is the noisiest flying I've ever heard.
Wow, it's
Weirdo.
loud as heck.
I think you guys can barely see him in that corner there.
Oh, I see the tail. Flopping out of the bookshelf.
So he's got a little cardboard scratching.
We'll see if he
not really a post, but we'll just call it that. Wow, it was loud as heck. All right, let's move over to. Did Crafting Gamer disconnect? Did he use up all his minutes?
Well, okay, actually, there was one.
Well, we'll see if he comes back. In the meantime, we'll slide over to Mar Hawkman then. First of all, do you have any questions, comments, concerns, follow-up with Doc Flamingo?
Is having the mind. Not really. Well, okay, actually, there was one thing. One trope that I really like with if you're going to have a magical item have a mind of its own is having the mind be the ghost of a former wielder. where something like that. Maybe the part of the curse of this thing is that if you die while wielding it, your soul gets stuck in it, and the other guy who used to be stuck in it goes to the afterlife, and you have to wait until something like that happens.
But it should be a pre-existing entity of some kind. It shouldn't just be like, okay, happy birthday. I'm a sword.
Well, but
there should be something going on.
That's part of the thing, though. It's like that gives you a reason to have the
motivation
entity possessing the sword have its own personality, because it had a history as a person before dying, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's all manner of things. Yes, and it could have the motivation of trying to recover memories. It might not exactly recall. It might just have feelings. It might be drawn to certain places or certain people. Yeah, there's all manner of things you can do with that.
Or like that thing that a goblin electric mayhem said earlier. Is like he remembers what the place is like. Or was like 100 years ago. Unusual magic items that I've seen used in stories. Because how long has this person been stuck in the sword, unable to see the world around? I don't know. Time to find out. Anyway, though, unusual magic items that I've seen used in stories that you don't see as a standard thing. Okay, you know how in D&D there's a standard idea of using spell scrolls? Well, one work of fiction that I read years ago, I don't actually remember what the name of the book was. It might have been one of the Kamigawa tie-in novels for Magic the Gathering, but what it
had in this... if you guys mention Magic the Gathering one more time tonight, I'm gonna turn this car around and go home and the stream.
Anyways, what it was it was something that works in a manner similar to spell scrolls, except that you would paint the spell on a ceramic tile or similar object, and then you would have to break the tile in order to release the magic contained in it.
In that case?
Which, of course, means that if you leave them on a floor and someone steps on them and breaks them, that could be unfortunate for whoever stepped on them.
Yeah, but is that a non-traditional magic item in that case?
Clarify that.
But it's something that it's a method of presenting magical items that's not aesthetically familiar to most people. So
fair enough. I just wanted to clarify that.
But it's something that you would presumably give players the ability to make if they were the right character class. It's just something that they have to think carefully about using, because you're not going to let them just make an endless number of them.
How do you show them that they can enrich long-term exploration and
Hey, Shadow.
So I think this is a perfect tie-in for this follow-up. When a player complains that these, we'll just say, odd items feel like gimmicks, how do you show them that they can enrich long-term exploration and intrigue?
Hyperborea, there's I don't remember the exact number. Something like 20. Sometimes gimmicks are what make a character class fun. Character classes different from each other is in some cases.
Please explain.
Well, I mean, so it's like in Hyperborea, there's I don't remember the exact number. Something like 20 different character classes, and what makes the character classes different from each other is in some cases extremely fundamental differences, like the difference between a pyromancer and a necromancer. They have a completely different spell list. I can't think of a single spell that both of those character classes have in common. They're both spellcaster focused character classes, and it's just that they have highly limited spell choices because their specific school of magic only allows for these specific spells. And yes, that doesn't really scream gimmick off the top of the head, but I've heard a lot of people call it that. It's like the whole, it's like you're a wizard, but you only get this part of the wizard spell book. The other guy gets this part of the book. And magic items kind of do similar things. Some of the time it's like it gives you a list of options, and the reason for the list of options being limited might be something that feels extremely arbitrary and is there more as a gameplay limitation than something that makes sense in universe, but
I think I can think of.
Okay. Crafting Gamer, now that you're back. All right. So, well, actually, first of all, do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to engage with Mark Hockman on that?
I keep forgetting. You always mute yourself. I want to make sure you were talking.
No, I'm good.
I think I can think of.
When introducing non-traditional magic items such as living or sentient weapons and objects that serve
all right, so Crafting Gamer, when introducing non-traditional, were you talking, Doc? I keep forgetting. You always mute yourself. I want to make sure you were talking.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. When introducing non-traditional magic items such as living or sentient weapons and objects that serve unconventional roles, how do you handle those who embrace these creative concepts, those who find them too unusual or distracting, and those who want them to fit naturally into the established setting?
What you are and aren't going to add, and if somebody doesn't like it, you're gonna have to say, "Well, that's my game. Sorry, if you don't like it, you're gonna have to leave." This is definitely one of those where it's you can't please everybody. There are you're gonna have to choose what you are and aren't going to add, and if somebody doesn't like it, you're gonna have to say, "Well, that's my game. Sorry, if you don't like it, you're gonna have to leave." But in general, I usually handle that by more powers of them as you possess it for longer. Introducing them in ways that they don't feel magic items that have to be used for a quest unique until you start getting deeper along with knowing them, such as for the rune weapons, you slowly get to know more powers of them as you possess it for longer. In magic items that have to be used for a quest specifically, I would introduce them where they're not immediately obvious what they are,
I don't
but
know if I can ask
maybe something magical enough you don't want to get rid of it till you know more about it.
Yeah.
Okay. You haven't done a lot of this, so I don't know if I can ask you.
I don't think I can ask you any of the follow-ups because they were really meant to dive into
Yeah,
using these non-standard items more.
Ooh.
And I don't have any personal follow-ups with you.
I don't think I can ask you any of the follow-ups because they were really meant to dive into
you guys have
into using these non-standard items more.
Questions, comments, concerns for them?
And I don't have any personal follow-ups with you because it's hard to do that without tangible examples. So anything that you guys have
anything that's left
you
on
want
the table,
questions,
guys,
comments, concerns
if
for
there's
them?
anything we didn't discuss, anything with regard to magic items, again, using D&D as a baseline, but we can go to any game out there.
All right. Okay, well, with that then, anything that's left on the table, guys, enters. Anything we didn't discuss, anything with regard to magic items, again, using D&D as a baseline, but we can go to any game out there. Anything that you guys want to just say, hey, it'd be cool to say with regard to magic items.
Isn't have fun with presentation. It's like if the story you're telling causes you to go in a direction that feels logical to you as the person writing the story, but isn't traditional high fantasy, have fun with it. It'll make the story interesting. Whether the players like it, there's only one way to find out. Regardless of whether you go for a traditional story or not, there's still only one way to find out whether the players are actually going to like it.
And
well,
it's like John Wick. You don't have to.
Anybody else?
I think it's just read the room and establish the parameters early on. It's like if you watch a movie and it's like John Wick. You don't have to count bullets. You don't have to is that possible? It lets you know exactly the kind of physics and reality you're dealing with. The same thing works in a game. And you can always you're doing a hyper realistic, very close to reality game. Make that clear from the beginning. If you're doing a crazy, loopy, all kinds of wacky stuff is going to happen. Establish that early on so there's no misunderstandings later. And you can always start out subtly and up things as you go along and find out where the line is with various people.
So I'm actually not going to do fun, mostly because I really did say most of my spiel.
All right, I guess with that, we can close out this show. It wasn't a crazy long one tonight, unlike the last couple that went way over time. So I'm actually not going to do fun, mostly because I really did say most of my spiel during the segments. There may be one or two little things that I could talk about with more elemental weapons. Somebody made a comment earlier about the Diabolus that I thought was interesting. Diabolus is from Palladium. Just not gonna address that now. I think that's outside the scope of magic items, plus magic spells. rules. So I'm not going to do a final thoughts or final comments today. I am going to do a thank you though. But go ahead.
I did actually have one thing I thought of, is that sometimes magical items can be used for, I'm not going to say specifically like plot reasons, but things that only make sense from an in-universe perspective and could be something very specific to a certain in-universe thing. Because like one magical item that I personally thought of for using in a fantasy setting was gauntlets that let a wizard change the element of a spell, which on the surface doesn't actually sound all that interesting because of the fact that it's only relevant if you have enemies that have magical defenses that can block the element of spells you're using. So if you're a wizard who, say, normally fires lightning bolts and someone has an anti-lightning shield, well, the gauntlets let you change that to something other than lightning bolts. Although in my case I used a fictional element called nether lightning, which again, it's something that's specific to that specific fantasy setting because it's, you know, part of that world. That from an in-universe perspective, you would have to have a completely different ward to block nether lightning than you would normal lightning. Again, it's just one of those things. It's like it's a magical weapon that lets you do something that you couldn't do otherwise, but it's not actually something that, like, say, doubles the damage you do or anything silly like that.
RPG Digest. We'll be continuing on
Sometimes they're useful.
Talk about how to award experience points in Rules Cyclopedia, and then talk about how to use NPCs.
Find my little banner here. So this Sunday on RPG Digest, we'll be continuing on Rules Cyclopedia, talking about how to award experience points in Rules Cyclopedia, and then talking about how to use NPCs. Well, Heathen Dog is going to cover the Rifter number 17 by Palladium, including a Q&A and something about blood magic, which apparently ties in with the blood shamans that he talked about in a previous Rifter. So that'll be interesting. Next week or next Friday on GMI, well, there is no GMI. It's the members only live stream next week. So if you're not a member yet, you want to come in and talk to me and Heathen Dog, I accidentally did it publicly last month. It's members now, but I accidentally did it publicly last month. So some people got a sneak peek of the type of things that we talk about behind the scenes, but it's about us and it's about you is what it is. So we get the time to talk with you guys. You ask us anything, it's AMA. We talk about upcoming things if we know it. We talk about whatever it is you guys want to talk about, because this is the time that we give back to you. I want to thank where am I here? Oh, actually, nope, I'm going to leave it at that for now because we got to go through the chat. So let's do this real quickly.
Silent agreement.
So Kevin Sullivan says a sentient item should be whispering in the character's ear all the time.
It was a glass slipper. Now that's an interesting magic item, wouldn't you think?
Okay.
I would actually call that
silent agreement.
Construct.
Okay.
Because does that definition
Kevin Sullivan also says for Cinderella it was a glass slipper. Now that's an interesting magic item, wouldn't you think?
Oh Jesus, dude.
I would actually call that a magical construct. Because
does that definition really matter in the terms of the topic?
I don't know that the rest of the costume lasted. What's the persistence of the item?
Oh Jesus, dude.
Because like it lasts at least 24 hours, but I don't know that the rest of the costume lasted longer than the evening.
Rules as written sucks. By the way, Rules as written is not this week. We'll actually be talking about that, I think, in May, if I remember. Or is it April?
Surface says, let your rights, artificers, and magic item specialists, let them be creative. Bounding them to rules as written sucks. By the way, Rules as written is not this week. We'll actually be talking about that, I think, in May, if I remember. Or is it April or May? We're going to be talking about Rules as written. But so what are your thoughts on, hey, don't stick just to the rules and what's there. Let them be creative. Let them have fun. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Remember Rule Zero,
folks out there.
Well, Rule Zero is like that thing in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's more of a list of suggestions than a law. Specifically, that the rest of the rules.
Okay, but what is that telling the folks out there?
For the game master to use. Well, stuff that the game master should in several versions of D&D, there's an actual printed rule in the book that says specifically that the rest of the rules are actually just suggestions for the game master to use, and stuff that the game master should feel free to customize as they see fit.
Especially when Palladium doesn't really have a magic weapon or item design system.
Okay.
What are your thoughts for having characters out there just make
interesting
items?
I absolutely love
so crafting gamer, especially when Palladium doesn't really have a magic weapon or item design system. What are your thoughts for having characters out there just make unique and interesting items?
If you can't craft,
I absolutely
items,
love it.
Where all the others come from? I understand runes.
I've always felt that's one of the downsides to Palladium is that there is no real crafting section, especially for magical items. Because
for those who don't know, to create a rune in Palladium,
if you can't craft your own magical items, where all the others come from? I mean, I understand runes. I would never let a player craft a rune unless they wanted to be pure evil anyway. But for those who don't know, to create a rune in Palladium, you have to take something like a dragon or demigod, boil it down to its soul, and then put its essence into the weapon.
But I always make sure it's within their realm of knowledge. Like, I want to create a spell. Well, create a wand, basically. Well, you're going to need to know that
so
spell.
let's do something a little different.
I usually let the players create something.
The low-hanging fruit for Palladium.
But I always make sure it's within their realm of knowledge. Like, I want to create a spell. Well, I'm going to create a wand, basically. Well, you're going to need to know that
so let's do something a little different. The low-hanging fruit for Palladium. Techno Wizards.
I don't know if you can hear me yet.
Techno Wizards, they can.
I love Techno Wizards, but I've only got them.
I absolutely
never had a GM that would let me play.
I don't know if you can hear me yet.
We can hear you.
Techno Wizard.
There we go.
I always,
but you're the game master.
I love Techno Wizards, but
I've Techno Wizard, and I want to do
I've only
something
got
that might not exactly be in the rules.
I never had a GM that would let me play. I was ever interested in playing Techno Wizard because I always.
But you're the game master, and I'm playing the Techno Wizard, and I want to do something that might not exactly be in the rules. But as we'll just say, the other criteria, the criterion is that I'm not doing something that's game breaking. I'm just doing something that's unique, different, a little bit out of scope, maybe, but not OP and not defined in the rules. Is that something that you might allow? And to be fair, I don't know everything Techno Wizards can do, so I can't give a good example. I'm just trying to get the brain juices going.
One of the game books.
That's exactly what I would allow because I love when players are original. Like I don't mean to talk about my book in this instance, but it's like one of the game books I'm working on. It's built a lot around the players being able to build their own stuff, not just items, but the and spells and everything like that. And I've loved that to the point that I've home gamed that into Palladium several times because I want players to be able to do stuff. I want to be able to do stuff like that as a player. And as long as I don't feel it's game breaking, I will let any player create something. It's just a matter of what it is to what their skills are.
This reminds me of something that you will see in loot item for killing a dragon. Some games, but not others. Where because like in some games that you will find loot items that exist solely for the purposes of crafting stuff. Like you might get as a loot item for killing a dragon, the dragon's heart, which is something that exists solely to be a crafting material, which some games just don't bother doing things like that, but some do. And, games that are like designed to have players craft things, a lot of them will have some really, really in-depth rules on what you can do and how to do it. But if you just want to let players get creative, if the player suggests doing something and it sounds cool, might as well run with it.
Characters did, and everything was.
And Doc.
My games have extensive rules for creating magic items. In fact, we had an entire campaign that was based around it, where that's basically what the characters did, and everything was built around them. like making these gifts for the various kings. It was a Middle Earth campaign, actually. The characters were elves. They had all been young children when the Rings of Power were made. They were rushed out of Austened Hill when it fell, and their whole goal was to go back there and reestablish it.
A player go outside the
So there's a lot of stuff.
So you got these rules, right?
If it didn't seem to be
using the comment that's on the screen from Seraphis, though, would you let a player go outside the scope if it didn't seem to be?
So I'm trying to find a different word. But I mean, campaign breaking, or it's like, whoa.
If it didn't seem to be
too powerful, or that just couldn't work, or
I don't know how to say it.
If it was something the rules didn't cover.
Yeah, I don't want to, because Shadow and Sun said nothing's game breaking, so I'm trying to find a different word. but I mean, campaign breaking, or it's like, whoa, okay, no, it's either too powerful, or that just couldn't work, or you're covering what somebody else or other magic already does, so I really can't let you do this. I mean, but is there something you would do you allow the characters to be imaginative?
All of them could be made. Oh, certainly. And if like, for example, I was saying before, like, I made this huge list of magic items were in this one campaign I made, and I made sure I figured out how all of them could be made within the rules. And if I didn't have something that covered it, I added it. So it's pretty extensive, although fairly straightforward.
Thank you very much,
and if I come across a situation where I don't have a rule for it, I'll make one.
We're not even close.
Okay, no, there we go.
Great stream, great panel.
Awesome.
Beware the
okay, one chat left. It's a super chat. Thank you very much, Samandohan, for $9.99. Where are we sitting for super chats tonight? Oh, we're not even close. But he says, great stream, great panel. Beware the cursed item. Amulet of low libido. Yeah, I don't want that. I don't want that. And if anybody casts that on my wife, we're gonna have problems.
I completely screwed up because I forgot to glow these guys.
Thank you for the $9.99, Mondo Hand. And with that, let's get us on out of here so we can head into segment 5. Let our hair down a little bit here. And you know what? I wasn't even in segment 4. I completely screwed up because I forgot to glow these guys. Look, see, without the glow, they don't exist. Now they exist. All right, like I said, we're not going to do final comments tonight. So thank you very much to tonight's panel, Doc Flamingo, the Crafting Gamer, and Mar Hawkman. Whether you agree or disagree with any panelist, I hope you found their viewpoints both entertaining and enlightening, and that they inspired fresh ideas for your upcoming gaming sessions. If you enjoyed this discussion, please like this video, subscribe to Legion of Myth, and to all this panels, whose link you can find in the description. Of course, check our